Alright, hello Guild Wars gamers, Muckluck here, and got a pretty massive amount of Guild Wars 2 news today. There is a upcoming changes and features balance preview, that is a mouthful, that they are showcasing today, and this is patch notes for the future. These are the changes that they are going to be putting out July 14th unless they change their mind. And as you can see, I'm just scrolling through it really quick here. There is a bit of meat to this. There is some girth to these notes. Now, they have got a stream that they did today explaining what the changes they make and the reasoning that they do it. So we are going to watch it in its entirety. And if you are watching this in the future on YouTube and you just want as much of a TLDR as I could possibly give, look at the timestamps. I will have a timestamp near the end of the video, and I'll try to condense everything as much as possible. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So,
to another Guild Wars 2 balance stream preview, excuse me. I am Roy Marks, and today I am joined by none other than Calcium C. Cohen and Taylor Trigg Brooks. How are you fellas doing today?
How are we doing today? Good, I suppose. I guess we're good. It's an exciting day.
I hope so.
We have a balance preview on a Monday.
Yeah, changing things up a little bit.
Unusual. But obviously, you know,
it's true. They usually do these on like Tuesdays or Fridays.
some holidays.
Look at their titles.
The usual plan.
Game Enjoyer. It's true. It's true. The Breaker. Card Game Enthusiast.
But we figured it out. We have the technology to stream on a Monday.
Yeah. I will be keeping an eye on the chat for a couple minutes in case there's any audio issues, so please feel free to let us know if there are. Hopefully.
Okay, two things. One, I love that they don't seem to be having audio issues. And two, I love that he says that he's watching the chat. Unfortunately, the last two streams they did, there was the one with Cal about Guild Wars 3. Or sorry, not Cal. Colin about Guild Wars 3. And then the last time they did a patch notes video, both of them, the audio was just like an absolute nightmare. So it sounds much better by comparison right now.
There won't be, you know, we do our best here. But yes, streaming on a Monday.
Roy is running the stream, so it will be fine.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe.
Maybe.
It's not like Taylor and I run the stream. It's always a disaster.
Okay, Cal, in your defense, the last time that I believe that Roy ran the stream, the VOD was muted. So I had to watch Laura watch the stream to be able to get any audio. So we all make mistakes. All of us past streamers make mistakes.
Sure.
It's not like I've ever forgotten to, you know, have the audio on the VOD. That's never happened. But
No,
yeah, anyways.
before.
Taylor, how you doing today? On the
Feeling
slide Monday.
good, excited for this patch. You know, we've had a lot of amazing franchise news, but now we're here to give you some amazing balance news.
Absolutely. Okay. Is there anything we want to mention before we get into the notes themselves? Any overviews? or anything?
I mean,
Or is it
as
just-
usual, you know, like this is the preview for the balance patch. That will be coming July 14th, so there's still a little bit of development time to action. Feedback that you guys might have after watching the post will be made on the forums right.
I'm going to talk about that really quick. In the past, when they have done this, where they have posted future patch notes, you know, they give people the opportunity to go to the forum post, which I will link under the YouTube video later, and I will put it in my live chats, and it gives people time to complain. Like, there's no sugarcoating it, that's what it is. It gives people time to go in here and be like, if you make this change, scrappers in Worldview World will die, you know, or whatever. You can go down here and you can complain, and if you present your point well enough, sometimes they're like, you know what, you're right, that does kill scrappers, we didn't mean to do that, and they'll change their mind. They have reversed things, and so they have reversed their decisions on things and undone them, so certain things have never gone through the patch. So if there's something in here, I'm putting it in my live chat right now, that you don't like, that's what you need to do. If you just go to Twitter and whine about it, doesn't do anything. But if you whine about it on their forums, it's like that meme, so you're saying there's a chance.
Right after the stream, I'll press the button. You can read all the patch notes and then give us your feedback there. Obviously, we're still working on a few things. You know, there's a handful of numerical changes that we're still working on. But the idea is that for the preview, the bulk of the big changes are done and implemented and available for everyone to see. And make sure you give your feedback. We do read all the feedback, and we do tend to make some number of adjustments based off that feedback between the preview and the patch.
Yep. We did not do a stream for the last balance stream, which was mostly aimed at, I believe, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, curbing a lot of the power scaling, the power levels that we had seen in the game. I don't know if, you want to talk at all about that,
I believe that was the patch where they aimed to do something around like a 15% nerf to everyone like across the board.
Or if you would like to, is this patch going to be kind of a similar situation where we're mostly looking at a lot of numbers adjustments, or are we kind of thinking or shifting a little bit from that with this patch?
There's a good mix of numerical changes and functional changes. Obviously, we touched a lot of numbers in the last patch, and things landed in various levels of where we wanted to. Some things are still a bit too high. Some things are a little bit lower than we'd like to see. So there will be some buffs in here as well to some of those things that landed a little bit lower than we expected. But there's also a good number of reworks in here that'll try to numerical changes are still important, even if they're not the most exciting. They do still have impact on the meta and how you interact with your skills and whatnot. But I know players love to see the reworks, and they're generally more exciting. And we do have a good number of those as well.
I don't know. Numbers get me excited, but maybe I'm the odd one out. Anyways, yeah, let's get into it. We can start looking at some of these changes, and as you can see there, the date for the balance patch, July 14th. That'll be coming up next month, and we're gonna start off with Warrior.
Okay, so usually when they do these things, they sometimes don't read every single thing on each slide. For the part where we're watching the show, I'll read every single thing. Later on, we'll do just like a condensed synopsis. Savage Leap now inflicts bleeding. Final Thrust. This skill has been reworked and is now rend. Maim your target with an immobilizing strike, then deliver a devastating blow that inflicts heavy bleeding. Flurry. This skill has been reworked and renamed Bloodthirster. Sweep your blade around yourself, slicing nearby enemies. Effect increases with adrenaline level. Heal if you strike a target, healing more if they are bleeding.
Go away.
Yeah, Warrior. First, starting off with Sword, a couple of reworks that we're talking about. Sword was a weapon that primarily,
So I can see both
in
at once.
competitive modes, was mainly used for its mobility and had a pretty good immobilize on the burst skill, but the other skills were not pretty good. And we want to see if we can make the weapon more interesting for everyone. So starting off Savage Leap, it's not going to inflict bleeding. This skill was pretty good, but we just wanted to make sure you can use it offensively when you want to. I think main thing for the Sword is want that offensive pressure to be something it can do rather than just the mobility. A lot of times you use it for an escape. Final Thrust is getting a bit of a rework. It's going to be a two-part skill. So the first part, you're going to swing your blade in front of you and deal an immobilizing strike, and then you're going to follow up with that thrust. That Final Thrust was. It's going to lose its execute threshold and all that to just become a more consistent skill, and that's where the immobilize is going to be on the kit. The immobilize was something that was not really healthy that we see it. Flurry was where it came from, and it was instant. You'd press Flurry and instantly people get immobilized. A lot of the time, you would press Flurry and then stow your weapon and do anything else because you didn't actually want to use the rest of the Flurry skill, and that's not something we really want to see. So Flurry is getting a full rework. It's becoming a skill known as Bloodthirster. You're going to sweep your blade around yourself and then inflict bleeding on people. And then after you hit people, you're going to heal yourself, healing based on how heavily they were bleeding. This is going to be an AoE skill, so it can hit multiple targets, and it's going to heal you only based on one target, but it's going to pick the target that's bleeding the most, so you can get the most value from that bleeding. So hopefully we can see Sword become a weapon that you can do a lot more dueling with and deal some pretty good damage without having to be locked in those long cast times.
Is there a cap on that bleed threshold? What if I had an enemy with 1,500 bleed stacks?
There is. It caps at 25, so you're not going to get a full heal on some world bosses in PvE. Yeah. In competitive modes, that cap is pretty high, so you should be...
Dude, imagine you're fighting a world boss and it's got 99 stacks of bleeding on it, and you hit it with this.
Not feeling it in PvE, it's still a pretty good healing amount. And there is a baseline bleeding, so if you hit someone with 3 bleeds, you're still going to get a decent amount of healing. But hopefully it adds more fluidity to the kit, and it feels a better weapon to play with.
Yeah, 1,500 bleeding stacks would be quite a bit. I wonder if we ever got.
So Warrior main hand Sword getting some love
up there. That would be a good record. You kind of mentioned that you're thinking that this will maybe enable some duelist builds a little bit. Is this more of is this kind of aimed at trying to change or enable a specific warrior build, or is this kind of we have a weapon that's maybe a little bit outdated in the modern Guild Wars 2 era, or a bit of both?
Yeah, I think Sword main hand is supposed to be a conditioned weapon, has a lot on it, but it really wasn't performing as such. A lot of conditioned builds. Berserker in particular would want to go Maze for that Berserker burst, and sometimes Sword was used, but a lot of other classes, Sword was just not there for it, and they were looking to other weapons, so we want to make sure that main hand conditioned Sword is there for what you wanted to be doing.
Very cool. All right, moving on. Got some more core warrior updates, changes.
Yep. These, the first two are dagger changes. Offhand dagger, similarly, pretty unused weapon. So we're going to see dagger 5 is getting a rework. Dagger 4, we felt like the skill is pretty cool. It does what we want to do. Pretty big damage, some boon removal, especially when you get that bonus. But it wasn't quite hitting hard enough. So we're...
All right, so hold on. So Wastrel's Ruin and Bladestorm are warrior offhand dagger. Wastrel's Ruin increased power coefficient from 0.75 to 1.0 in PvP and 1v World. Bladestorm, this skill has been reworked and named Hushblade. Strike out in a cone in front of you, dazing enemies struck. So before, I mean, like he said, there wasn't many people using this before. But before, it did a flurry of attacks, reflected projectiles that were coming from the front, and you got barrier if you hit a foe. But Hushblade is a conal daze. As if Spellbreakers needed more CC. Earthshaker increased the power from 2.0 to 2.75 in PvE. Okay, hold on. So these three are Hammer. Staggering Blow increased power coefficient from 1 to 1.5 in PvE. Backbreaker increased power coefficient from 1.5 to 2.25 in PvE.
Increasing the power coefficient in competitive modes, so it can really match something like offhand mace for the pressure. But Bladestorm was a channeled skill that I think in its best days it was just a bad whirling axe. It didn't really deal as much damage. It kind of had some defensive components, but people really didn't want to use that skill ever. So we're gonna try and
yeah. So like if you were using an offhand item for a defensive reason, you're probably going to use shield. Like it's just making the offhand dagger like kind of like a bad shield. It didn't really have a good spot that it fit in for usefulness.
lean it to more of a utility skill. It's being renamed Hushblade, and it's basically going to be a single strike. So you're going to do that sweep, like one of the sweeps you do in Bladestorm, and it's going to daze the enemies. So it does have that long range cone part of it. It's like 300 range, so you can get pretty good distance from your enemy. It synergizes pretty well with like Spellbreaker things. No escape, that's going to make it immobilize. It's going to be on the lower cooldown side. So on PvE, it has 2 charges. In competitive mode, it's only 1. But so in PvE, it'll be pretty good at upkeeping attackers' inside stacks, while also doing some decent damage. So hopefully, offhand dagger is something you want to play on Blades or on Spellbreaker now. In competitive modes, it should be pretty good again for dueling, something Spellbreaker wants to do to keep up in those 1v1s.
Cool.
And then we have for Hammer, these are just some damage bonuses for PvE. After the patch we had, we noticed that Hammer was doing a bit too low. The numbers surrounding Hammer, like defense, we were happy with, but Hammer itself we felt could use just a little more, so we're buffing up at Hammer numbers itself.
Cool. Very cool. Very straightforward. And moving on, we got some Bladesworn updates.
Okay. So let's see. Dragon Trigger. You can now move while channeling this. That's big. Okay, so Bladesworns, while channeling their giant weeb slash, can now move. And although I, like, in the last couple of weeks, I've been on a big PvP World v World kick, and I've been playing mostly those game modes, and I haven't seen many Bladesworns, but the ones I have run into were quite terrifying. Like maybe it's got like a higher skill ceiling, so I see less people using it, but the ones that I do see using it are quite like they're a force to be reckoned with. So this is going to make them even nastier. Maximum movement speed is reduced while channeling. Dragon Slash Force, you can now move while casting this. Boost is now ground targeted. Reach, you can now move during the cast of this skill. Okay, so all like the big slashes, you can move during them, and boost, you can control where you land.
A little exciting stuff here.
Decent number of Bladesworn updates for this patch. We see kind of on the first set of skills here is we're allowing you to get a little bit of movement while channeling, holding your Dragon Slash, preparing your Dragon Slash. This is something that we did with Deadeye's Kneel, where we see a little bit of movement. Is there's opportunity to not be full speed, obviously, but having that little bit of extra mobility allows you to position a little bit better, or avoid things that you might otherwise not be able to.
Another thing where this could be good is with the Dragon Trigger. If you are holding the movement key down, like you're running forward, and you click Dragon Trigger, sometimes you might go into it, and then you take a minor step and you interrupt it. And I believe that this will make it to where you don't have to worry about accidentally interrupting yourself.
So that's just what we see here. Some nice little mobility update for Dragon Trigger and the Dragon Slashes being able to kind of move during the casting of the skill as well. Just a little bit more flexibility in how you're able to use these skills.
A lot of Bladesworn enjoyers in the chat, it looks like. Sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
Important to call out with Boost that it's becoming ground targeted. So before it would send you the full distance in one direction, but now Boost, if you only want to go just a little bit of that, you can target it and it'll bring it to you. It feels pretty fluid. It's similar to some of the other movement skills we've been added. So hopefully
that's one of the reason those that have watched me do like PvP and stuff, I love Ranger Staff for movement more than like Ranger Greatsword. Because Greatsword, if you're using it just to like get away or something, or to go to a target, if you don't have a target, it just goes a set distance. But the staff is ground targeted, which makes it much, much easier to use it very quickly and go exactly where you want to go. So they're getting that treatment.
you can use that and not worry about just going off a boss arena or something and dying.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice usability improvement for that type of skill.
Yeah, very cool.
Okay, Dragon Spike Mine. I can't remember the last time I saw this. Reduce the power coefficient from 2.5 to 1.5 in PvE. Reduce the power coefficient from 1 to 0.6 in PvP and World v. World, but will now additionally inflict bleeding. So power damage going down, but it's getting some Condi. Overcharge cartridges. This skill now causes explosion attacks to inflict burning, in addition to its other effects. This effect of this skill now lasts the entire duration of the buff instead of the number of attacks used. Buff duration reduced from 10 seconds to 5. Supercharging the buff, it now extends the duration and increases burning duration in addition to other effects. Are they making Condi Bladesworn? Swift as the Wind trait has been replaced with Sharp as the Wind, which modifies your Gun Saber and Dragon Slash skills to focus on dealing condition damage. They are. Additionally, with this trait equipped, you burn nearby foes and gain increased flow rate when swapping to the Gun Saber in combat. Huh. Like, I really like this. This is outside of the box. I like this. Like, Druid has a trait that makes all their heal skills do conditions. It's just like, it's one trait, you take it, it drastically changes the playstyle. And this is, like, the same thing. I don't know if it'll be good, but I love that they're trying stuff. River's Flow, this trait has been reworked. The trait now modifies Gun Saber and Slash skills to focus on supporting allies and debilitating enemies. Additionally, with this trait equipped, you gain swiftness to nearby allies and gain increased flow rate when swapping to Gun Saber. Okay, so we've got this makes your Bladesworn Condi, and this makes your Bladesworn support. Unseen Sword now strikes nearby enemies and grants you increased flow rate when swapping to Gun Saber in combat.
Moving into some of the more exciting changes here, so some improvements to some of the utility skills. The big changes here are coming from the traits here at the bottom. We're going to see a few different reworks to the Adept tier traits, and these are going to try to introduce some additional playstyles for Bladesworn. So we see Swift as the Wind becoming Sharp as the Wind. This is going to modify a lot of the Gun Saber skills and the Dragon Slash skills to be more condition focused. So, Condi Bladesworn, hopefully something that is going to be a bit more viable. You can obviously play with the new sword. You can play with the new trait to get, essentially the Condi version of
Burn Sword.
all of the Bladesworn skills. And similarly, we have River's Flow here is going to be more of a supportive shift in those skills as well. This is going to be, Bladesworn is probably going to be a little bit more of that unorthodox support character that we've seen in a few cases where, maybe not the most expected elite spec to play a support build, but we've seen some of these definitely work out, and Core Rear does have a decent number of support tools available to them. So, we've had a decent amount of excitement from this trait internally, and we want to really see how it plays once it's actually out there for the greater player base. So maybe support Bladesworn, Condi Bladesworn, these can be additional playstyles for Bladesworn, which is obviously a very good power DPS at the moment, but not a whole lot outside of that.
Very cool. All right, moving on. Even more Bladesworn changes.
I think going forward, I'm going to let them read it, and then if they skip any of these, then I'll pause it and read them.
Wow. Bladesworns are eating good today.
More Bladesworn changes. We see a lot of the supportive elements here. We see, again, strike and condition damage coming from Fierce as Fire. It's based off ammunition spent, Again, just trying to flesh out those playstyles for the Condi build and the support build that don't have a whole lot of trait support right now because we didn't really expect them to exist, but now that we're kind of expecting them to exist, we now see, Unshakable Mountain giving some barrier to allies, Immortal Dragon granting protection to allies, and then Daring.
Okay. Unshakable Mountain can give allies barrier. Fierce as Fire, it boosts condition damage in addition to what it used to. Immortal Dragon can give prot to allies. Daring Dragon increases the effectiveness of Dragon Slash skills depending on what variation.
Dragon, this is, in addition to its current functionality, it's just going to kind of improve your Dragon Slash skills, and that's going to affect all the different variations of Dragon Slash now, whether it's the power version or the Condi version or the more supportive version.
Cool. Now, this might be slightly out of the scope of this balance stream, so feel free to expand on this as little or as much as you like, but do you feel that this is kind of something that was always sort of intended for Bladesworn to have these multiple different build types? Could be playing Condi, could be playing support, obviously a lot of, as a power DPS, or is this something that we're just kind of trying to enable now more so with these changes, just kind of feeling like, oh, it might just be the time for Bladesworn to have more options?
Yeah, I think we like to introduce options, especially for specs that don't have as many. It's not that every elite spec needs 3 different playstyles or whatever number you want to lock into, but we do feel like Bladesworn was a bit limited in. It essentially had like one real playstyle. And it's very good at doing that. But we felt that a lot of the traits, there was an opportunity to leverage some of the lesser used traits or some of the traits that didn't play as well with like the core Bladesworn playstyle to introduce an alternative build. It's always going to be a DPS build, so we felt that adding the Condi build could be a very interesting option there. And then the support build, it's definitely, Bladesworn has had some more bruisery elements in the past. Obviously, Unshakable Mountain's kind of been that big, iconic, competitive trait that has driven Bladesworn's viability, whether it's too strong or too weak. A lot of Bladesworn viability has been around the strength of Unshakable Mountain, but a lot of these supportive elements will obviously be beneficial to you as well. So it's kind of almost enhancing like the more bruisery playstyle of Bladesworn, but then it's also extending to your allies. And it might be something that doesn't necessarily work as well in practice, but I think that we want to see how it plays. Like I said, we've been playing with it internally. There's a decent amount of excitement, so we want to see how it plays once more people get their hands on it. But this could end up shifting to just be more focused on like that bruisery Bladesworn with more of the self-sustain and control-y aspects. But the support Bladesworn could be pretty interesting as well.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that. And all right, that's going to wrap up the
Thief.
warrior changes. So we're going to be moving on to Thief now.
Yes. The first thing for Thief, pretty big. Pistol Whip is getting reworked. Pistol Whip for the longest time in competitive modes was not a really skill you wanted to press. In PvE, it really wasn't used for its damage, which you would think it was. It's more used for the control from it, if you were to press it. So we decided that Sword Pistol is a weapon set that has a lot of utility inside it. You have the Infiltrator Strike, you have Headshot, and Black Powder. That really what you wanted to have a complete kit was just a skill that did damage. And be kind of cool at it. So it's now going to be changed and reworked to Flawless Execution. You're going to spin around while you shoot your pistol at nearby enemies and also strike. So it's going to be a skill that's similar to Whirling Wrath. You'll shoot your pistol at targets that it's not going to do random angles like Whirling Wrath. It'll shoot to targets, so it'll actually hit them and strike them. And at the end, you'll do a powerful forward slash when you come out of the spin. So hopefully this ends up being a DPS skill that makes Sword Pistol a weapon set that is more desirable in all game modes. In PvE should do pretty good damage to use it as just a DPS. In competitive modes, you can find the right opportunities to go in. You are pretty vulnerable. It's not an evade or anything while you're spinning around, so you need to make sure that you're not going to get blown up when you go in. But hopefully it does enough damage. You have that Sword Pistol, stealth in, go in with Infiltrator Strike and then hit them for pretty big damage. So Sword Pistol, hopefully a weapon set that's back on the menu. That's not just like, usually it was, you play something like Scepter Dagger or have another Dagger weapon set, then you swap the Sword Pistol, but we want this to be kind of the main reason that you want to play the weapon.
We did get a new animation. Taylor said he was going to demonstrate the animation for us.
I had to stand up. It's a lot. You like spin around, do a lot of slashes. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
A lot of gunshots, actually.
Did you do the mocapping for the?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, awesome. All right, very cool. Taylor inserting himself into the game in Thief.
They do have a motion capture room at the headquarters. They could.
All right, and then we also see some other updates to some other utility skills.
Yep, these are kind of miscellaneous things. Death Advance, it's going to get some QOL of how to use the skill. So when you are kneeled and you press the cover, it will now automatically swap to Death Advance even if you're not in the sniper's cover. So kind of go forward. A lot of times you're putting that cover in front of you anyway, so you just want to move forward through it to get that combo, that stealth. And then also, alternatively, while you are standing in the cover, it's going to become a ground targeted skill. So if you don't necessarily want to go forward and you're still kneeled, you can use it to ground target close to yourself or behind, what have you. So just more control over where this is leading you to hopefully be better in those moments where you're in terrain that it gets really wonky. Smoke screen. This is also getting a rework. It's no longer going to pulse blindness within, but instead it's going to be a ring, kind of like Ring of Fire, that when you traverse through it, it is going to do some things. It's not going to burn like Ring of Fire, but instead it's going to inflict debilitating conditions as you pass through the smoke screen. Things like weakness, blindness, because you're so flustered, you're confused, you just walk through the smoke screen, you don't know. But additionally, some additional functionality is that you're going to gain stealth when you yourself exit the smoke screen. It's just you, not your ally, so it's not Veil. But this is also just another utility option for stealth that's pretty good. You can use it, fight people within it, but when they leave, you can also leave and get that advantage onto them. Signet of Shadows, this is getting reworked to be another stealth utility to give more options than just Black Powder. So now you have Smoke Screen, you also have Signet of Shadows. Before, it was just a button that you pressed that did a lot of like random conditions by people, and it made them like, oh my god, that's so annoying. But it was just like an annoyance. It wasn't really worth ever using. But now it is going to grant you stealth and swiftness and remove movement impairing conditions from yourself. So it's pretty get out of dodge skill. Increasing the cooldown in competitive modes is pretty strong, but hopefully, a lot more utility gives this, some room to shine and be its own skill. Then lastly, we have Shadow Refuge. Shadow Refuge, if people remember, at the very beginning of this game was a very strong skill, and then, the strategy against it was, the thief can't leave it, they're going to get revealed, so you just cleave down, and those strategies have gotten a lot more prevalent. So we're adding some condition damage and strike damage reduction to allies inside the Shadow Refuge to, when you're inside it, be an actual refuge for you, take reduced damage. You're also going to get that healing from it, does some pretty nice healing, so hopefully this is a good defensive skill for people that want, both the defense and also gives a really long stealth to allow you to reposition.
Cool.
Sorry, I looked at something on my wall behind. There's actually a spider coming right towards me.
Oh.
So I did get distracted for a minute. No, it's totally fine. But some people may have noticed me looking like off the camera.
That's
He's getting ganked IRL.
Spider.
Yeah.
No, the only thing scarier than a spider you see is a spider that you can no longer see.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't stealth, right?
No, it's still there. I can see it.
Yep. All right, moving on. Hopefully Cal will stay with us and not have to run away. I would have left the room, but
it's not a big spider. If it was a big spider, I'd be out of the room by now.
Yeah. All right.
Some,
Thief traits.
Yep. Trait updates, even the odds. It's no longer going to apply might, but instead it's going to inflict conditions. I think here we really wanted to lean into deadly arts, applying some debilitating conditions, because it has both that poison for condition damage builds, but it also really wants to be that like power line where you inflict these debilitating conditions and you get the damage bonus from the minor traits. So cripple and blindness when you strike from your stealth attack, that could be a pretty good opener, blinding people when you come out of stealth. And then the cripple to just give another unique condition. So hopefully even the odds is a more appealing option. Improv is now going to give Spectre some additional Shadow Force when siphoning. Obviously, Improv doesn't do anything for Spectres because they don't have stolen skills, so they can't use anything. So, while you still get the cooldown reduction from using it, we want this little added bonus. Potent Poisons is pretty much what you're always seeing on Spectre, but Improv just want another option there for people that wanted it. Lotus Poison is now going to give Might when you poison. So just another tie-in for the power builds that want to use deadly arts. The poison here, you're still inflicting it, but it's not going to do much damage. You're getting that heal reduction, but now the might on top of it should be an extra reward, help it feel good. Panic Strikes. This was a trait that, again, was something a long time ago was really good, but over time got nerfed due to its uncontrollability, some might say. Wasn't really a great trigger. We don't like those health threshold ones, so we're changing it now that it's a set number of conditions. So I think it's either 3 or 4. So once they have that many unique conditions, you're going to get that. So it should be a lot more controllable with even the odds and like poison on steel, stuff like that. It's going to be pretty easy to hit those, so you know that you're going to get this immobilized. So it should be a lot stronger, and hopefully, make deadly arts stack up better to things like Shadow Wars or Crit Strikes. Lastly, Rending Shade. It's going to get some unique functionality. Instead of inflicting fear, it's going to destroy the barrier on stealth attacks that hit a boonless foe. Should be pretty niche, we think. But
destroys the foe's barrier if a stealth attack hits a boonless foe. Yeah, that is definitely niche. Like, that could be amazing. So for those that don't know, barrier stacks up to 50% of your max life. So someone with 20k health can have a 10k barrier. And it's definitely a pretty niche situation. If you're fighting someone pumping out barrier, they probably got a lot of boons. But if you can get the boons off, you can take all their barrier away with your opener.
Sometimes niche things are pretty interesting for what they can do. So, specific bosses in PvE can break that barrier, kind of like Amalgam got the ability to, or in PvP versus certain builds that may not have a lot of boons. If you steal their boons,
is it barrier a boon? No, it's not. It's not a boon
as well for a lot of burst. But then we can move on to the last changes for Thief, which are going to be Deadeye, which are 2 changes, but I think they're pretty impactful. The first one is Deadeye's Mark is now going to be fully instant, and on top of that, it is going to shadow step you like normal steel when you use a melee weapon. This should hopefully open up a lot of
melee Deadeye
for Deadeye in competitive modes. When you have those melee weapons like dagger or sword, you really want that shadow step option, but Deadeye didn't bring it, so you felt like you had to use these ranged weapons to make value for it. But now you can do things like Deadeye's Mark into Cloak and Dagger and then Backstab. Malicious Backstab is a very strong skill. It does 10% more damage for each point of malice, so that's a lot of damage. So, Glass Cannon, Deadeyes, they're going to be pretty scary with this change. So hopefully, I've been playing with it. It's pretty fun to play with. I feel like people feel it's pretty smooth, so this is pretty exciting. And then Silent Scope, this trait has been reworked. Before this granted you stealth on dodge with a rifle, which was incredibly strong to the point that Deadeye itself was balanced around this. We had a lot of traits that said if you had this trait, it also is worse. It just was a lot, and we decided it's just not healthy to have this mechanic. So we are removing that, and now the trait is going to give you precision with extra precision when you get stealth, to get more opportunities for crits, some bonuses for stealthing, but not give you that very easily accessible source of stealth.
Quick question about the Deadeye's Mark. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to mention that this is also kind of the idea behind some of the utility skill reworks for additional stealth sources. We are taking away this pretty reliable stealth source from Deadeye, but now there's some potentially more interesting options in the utility slot, which obviously are going to be longer cooldown, but a bit more controllable because we did have pretty big concerns with Silent Scope.
Yeah, I was going to quickly ask for the Deadeye's Mark change. So it says only melee weapons, right? So obviously not if you're using a ranged weapon. Is this does that work if you're using a dagger in the offhand or only main hand?
It does check your main hand. So if you're something like pistol dagger, it will not teleport you. You have to be dagger pistol, for example.
Cool, awesome. All right, as Joe said, I think this is it for the thief changes, but some very interesting stuff, some cool Deadeye changes, some nice stealth buffs there, and we're moving on to Revenant.
All right, we got some Revenant changes. So first couple notes here. Again, Hammer landing a little bit below where we like to see for after our big PvE
So this is just hammer PvE damage buffs.
damage pass. So a couple of nice damage increases here, hopefully to bring it a little bit more in line. Right in the Great Dwarf, this is getting kind of more of like a shuffle around of how the functionality works. Right now it's obviously just a large strike damage reduction that then becomes a strike and condition damage reduction when you have Versed in Stone. We are shifting that around so that it's going to be a lower damage reduction, but it will always give you strike and condition damage reduction. And then if you have the trait, it will bring it up to that 50% number. So this will make it just a lot more reliable for builds that either want to take a different Grandmaster trait in that slot or they want to play a different trait line entirely. You'll still be able to play Chalice. Get Right of the Great Dwarf is like a pretty powerful defensive skill, and it will feel just a little bit more consistent than it does right now.
Continue on. Renegade
changes. Move on to some Renegade changes. So a lot of trait reworks here or trait updates here because we felt that a lot of the Renegade traits aren't the most exciting or the most impactful. There's a little bit of wasted space, kind of. So we felt that we could rework a few things here. Ashen Demeanor, this is just one of the adept traits getting a little bit of a rework. Might Resistance and Fervor on healing skill. We had the Resistance trait in the Master Tier slot that hasn't been seeing a ton of play, Bold Reversal. We still think it's like a valuable valuable boon, and putting it on kind of a easier to or less competitive trait slot because obviously the adept traits are all your Kala's Fervor traits. So now you're still going to be getting your Fervor, but now you can get Resistance. You can get some Might as well. Could be slightly more appealing, and then give access to that Resistance. That's pretty useful. Bold Reversal. Now we have room in that slot for something a little bit more exciting. That's just going to improve all your Citadel order skills. So we see Heroic Command also granting Swiftness, Citadel Bombardment going to be doing some vulnerability, and Orders from Above will be pulsing Protection as well. So a nice little, nice little benefit for kind of all the builds. Obviously a little bit more supporty, but we do have that just general mobility and vulnerability. Nice little damage boost in especially in competitive modes where you're not already hitting vulnerability cap. Heart Piercer, we've essentially taken the strike damage bonus from All for One. That's a trait that we weren't super happy with. It's always been intended to be more of that Kala stance trait, but it's been pretty generic. Had the protection for a long time. Then we had kind of the strike damage bonus as okay, well maybe power DPS builds will play Kala, and this is where their strike damage bonus comes from. But it's just not super interesting. It's not really what we were hoping for that trait. So moving that strike damage bonus into Heart Piercer, just going to be part of or a bonus against bleeding enemies. Still going to be giving that bleeding bonus as well. So it'll just be more of a generic DPS trait that either strike or condition damage builds can play. And then All for One is going to be more of that Kala stance trait. This is going to be anytime you trigger Band Together, which is the mechanic of the Kala stance, that after you use one of the Kala stance skills, you can then reactivate your next Kala stance skill instantly, and it gets some nice little bonuses. So anytime you trigger that Band Together, it will reduce the recharge time of the enhanced skill and also give you some energy back. So will allow you to kind of keep chaining those skills together. The numbers are going to be a bit different for PvE and PvP because we do obviously have some concerns about making giving too much energy to this build, especially in PvP, but we feel that this is just a little bit more of a true Kala stance trait. So we think it's a pretty exciting mechanic, and we're excited to see how it plays. Then we have a couple of updates to the Grandmaster traits as well. Vindication, no longer going to get extra missiles. There's a little bit of concern around how much one-shot capability that's really added to the skill when you are able to get the full missile count and they all land. It does a bit too much damage. We're pretty happy with how much damage the skill does just by default, but then the extra missiles kind of pushed over the top. So we're shifting that more into more of a control bonus. We get that extra daze. The first time a missile strikes an enemy, you will daze them. So that can obviously daze a pretty large number of enemies as well because there are so many different missiles, but it will only daze an individual target once per skill. And then Righteous Rebel, getting a little bit of a healing bonus here.
I'm just imagining two blobs fighting in World v. World, and one of them getting hit by a whole bunch of Citadel bombardments and just dazing tons of people in the blob.
2 Orders from Above. We did kind of shuffle around what the other half of the trait did to be more healing centric, so pushing it into more of that truly heal renegade type of trait. And obviously, it will still do the things that it previously does. But in addition, you will get some extra healing from that. So now you take Righteous Rebel, Bold Reversal, Orders from Above is going to be a pretty strong skill. Getting that healing, getting that protection, increased duration, and all that good stuff.
Quite a few sort of like a variety of changes with these traits. Some supporty stuff, a little bit of damage boosting, some utility. Is this kind of trying to push Renegade towards a specific role or a couple different roles, or is this kind of just we weren't really happy with where we were seeing the Renegade in general, and we wanted to change up how the traits were functioning and its utility skills or functional skills?
Yeah, I mean, the two DPS builds kind of always existed. You always have the power DPS Renegade or the Connie DPS Renegade, and then support Renegade. It's kind of hit or miss, but the stance itself has supportive elements. You obviously have the heal that heals your allies. You have the life stealing. There's some defensive boons sprinkled in there as well. So there is, some amount of support Renegade that could exist. And we felt that since this trait had already been pushed a little bit in that direction, that we push it even more in that direction and really try to enable that playstyle.
Cool. Awesome. All right, moving forward, we've got Ranger.
Everybody's favorite class.
I believe Taylor, our resident Ranger expert, will be taking these notes over.
Yep, so this is going to be a pretty druid-heavy section. Before we get into that, go for the throat, ferocious strength. These are some changes. Just Soul Beast landed a little low than we like, so we're bumping it up a little bit. And Gale Shot Strike is getting a buff. We think Gale Shot itself is in a pretty good place, but Strike was an alternative Grandmaster trait that in the beta was very, very strong, and we nerfed it a lot. But we do know that it's a playstyle people enjoy, so we want to make sure it's still viable. So we are bumping it up and keeping an eye on it. But at the top, we see Astral Wisp. It says it's getting reworked. The core skill is going to do the same thing, just going to be different. Before, you'd send out a Wisp that would hit an enemy or an ally and then circle around them healing. This meant that to get allies, you had to ally target them. In a lot of cases, you didn't want to click them, or if your enemy's far away or moves, you'd lose that healing.
Yeah, all right. So obviously as a Ranger main, I have more feedback I can give on this section, but just to show real quick. So Staff 2, if anyone here is not a Ranger main, you had to click an enemy or an ally, and you have to be facing them, you have to target them, and it has a cast bar, it has a travel time, and then it starts doing a very small heal in that area. So targeting, facing, travel time, and cast bars, like all those things. And honestly, it's like the amount of time it takes to come online, it's worse than doing like 3 auto attacks. But if you already had an enemy targeted, you might just hit it, but only if everything else is on cooldown. It's worse than like every other button you've got. So it's like if everything else is on cooldown, you would use it as like a filler. But if they're changing it to be ground targeted, like this, that is infinitely easier if you could just like throw it there, and it'd be easier to get used out of it.
So now it's going to function where
also, if it's like PvP or something, if the enemy has Aegis or they dodge the Wisp connecting, then the Wisp will not heal the area. Like it has to hit and connect with the original target. So if they block it or evade it, then it won't heal.
You're going to send out a Wisp to a target location, and then at the Wisp it'll detonate and attach to allies, and then those allies will get healed. So it's going to be a ground targeted skill. Your allies are there, you press it, and then it's going to attach to your allies, and they're going to get healed.
Real quick, it says allies. I wonder if it means like it will attach to multiple people, because right now it attaches to one person, but then it does a few pulses where it heals 5 people in the radius of it per pulse. So I'm not sure if it will connect to multiple people or if it still just connects with one and then heals the area.
So it should be a lot easier to use. And then we can move on where we see glyphs for Druid.
Okay, hold on a sec. So they didn't really read these. So go for the throat, increase the damage of bonus of Lesser Sick'em when a merged Soul Beast is with it from 10 to 15% PvE. I know of like 4 bugs with go for the throat. I don't know if they have fixed any of them. I'd have to check them again after the patch. Furious Strength, increased damage bonus from 10 to 15% PvE. Shrike, increased power coefficient per strike from 0.5 to 0.8 in PvE. All right, so these two are Soul Beasts. This is Soul Beast buff. This is Soul Beast with Beast Mastery, which it would probably use. And Gale Shot is getting a damage buff as well.
So should be a lot easier to use. And then we can move on where we see glyphs for Druids. All of them are getting a small change. Basically, for most of them, the support radius is getting normalized to 360, save Glyph of Equality for stability. But so Glyph of Rejuvenation, 300, 360. Glyph of Alignment, Wind Celestial Avatar, 300, 360. Just make it easier to get the support out of these skills. We feel like what they do is pretty good. Just sometimes it might be hard to actually get to your allies. Glyph of Equality, it's now going to apply stability in PvP as well, and give the stability stacks from 1 to 2. Just a bit better stab for Druid. We don't want to go too much.
That's really good. That's really good. So real quick for, again, this is something I talk on. Normally, my Druid build looks something like this if I'm supporting a group in PvE. Glyph of Equality gives 1 application of stability It is instant cast. It's also a stun break and a small daze, but it's one application of stability around you with a 24-second cooldown. The only other source of stability a druid can give their group is burning their elite skill, which does pulsing stability for 5 seconds. It's a 48-second cooldown, but if they use that, then it's on cooldown and they can't use it for its other stuff, which it can do mass condition cleansing or mass reviving. It can revive like a 10-man raid group. So if you're using it just for stability, you give up those other features for like almost a full minute. But so this is usually the go-to move for stability, and that's it. Those two options are it for Druid. So just having a second stack on this one is very nice.
On it, they have the elite if you want stability as well, but can be an option in PvP specifically. A lot of these changes are to address that Druid is not a viable support in PvP specifically, and that's something that there's a lot of reasons for, but we're trying to shore up there so it can be a more potential pick a lot of the times. Having tools to heal outside of Celestial.
So really quick, Glyph of the Tides has so all of the glyphs on Ranger, they do different things depending on the mode that you're in. So, like, for example, Glyph of the Tides, it does a knockback, but if you're in Astral mode, it does a pull. It's either a short-range pull or a short-range knockback, one of the two. So if I'm reading this right, it says Tides will now knock down instead of knock back in PvP. So that means the non-Astral form will do a knockdown, and the Astral form will do a pull. Reduce the cooldown from 35 to 25 seconds of PvP. Glyph of Unity. Unity was a weird one. Unity attaches a beam to foes or friends. If you attach it to foes, what it does is every time you take damage, you will do damage to the foes that are connected to you. And then Glyph of Unity is whenever you're healed, it also heals the people tethered to you as well. So you could see those tethers right there. So basically, like, you could use this and then just, like, heal yourself really heavily, and it would also just extra healing to everybody around you. But usually isn't worth a slot, honestly. Typically, a Ranger in PvE would just use a Glyph of, gives you stability. And then maybe if you're fighting, like, Veil Guardian, you would use Tides for the knockback. Unity, I literally know one use of Unity in the whole history of Guild Wars 2. There was a meme you could do on Deimos with like 8 druids where you go to the spot where the hand kiter made the pile of hands. Everyone used Unity to connect themselves to the boss, run into the hand stack and use Signet of Stone so they were immune to damage for like 5 seconds, and the boss would kill himself. But it took longer to set up that meme than it would take to just kill the boss normally. So, like, it's a funny thing, but I don't know of any actually, like, useful things you could do with, Glyph of Unity in the game. Alignment, similarly, Alignment does a bunch of conditions around you, but if you're playing Condi, it's worse than every single trap or sharpening stone. So no one uses Glyph of Alignment. And then the Astral form of Glyph of Alignment is like an additional heal and a Condi cleanse. So Glyph of Alignment is kind of in a weird spot as well. So increasing the range on alignment is nice. I don't know that that is going to make it suddenly viable anywhere. Rejuvenation is the druid heal. It's just pure healing. If you're not astral, it heals you a lot and allies a little. If you're in astral, it heals allies a lot and you a little. So this one does get some use because you could just go astral click this and it's just a massive heal all around you. If you're playing Druid, though, you might also be using Water Spirit, which does almost as much healing, and also Vigor, or Healing Spring, which does healing and regen on everybody. That's just for support Druid gameplay. So that one does see some usage. Unlike Alignment, the extra stability here is nice. Tides is interesting. Having knock down instead of knock back will mean you don't see it much these days. There used to be a druid build in PvP that would just sit on a node, and anytime someone came over and tried to cap it, you just kept like knocking them off the point, so they couldn't really stop you from taking it. But now that it's a knockdown instead of a knockback, that is simply one less knockback in a PvP druid's kit if they're trying to focus on that. They could still use like longbow knockback and things like that. Glyph of Unity is now, so this is the one of the beams. Now Glyph of Burgeoning. Heal nearby allies and grant astral force. while in Selly Avatar, grants allies barrier and endurance instead. Interesting. So Astral Force is... Okay, this right here, this blue bar, I have been calling this Druid Fluid for years, but essentially, if you want to go into Astral Form, this button has to be off cooldown, and this bar has to be 100% full. It is not like Death Shroud where you can go into it at like 10%, it has to be 100% full. So see, if I go in and then back out, there's a 10-second cooldown here, and this has to fill up also. So if we've got a button to go back into it, like honestly, if you're healing 5 people constantly and there's like regen ticks and stuff happening, this, like right now it's off cooldown, but I can't go into it because the bar's not full. But if I'm healing other people, that's never a problem. So that extra Astral Force could be useful in PvP, but if you're with a group in Fractals or raids, it's never going to be an issue. The barrier is interesting, because right now, Druid only has one way of giving their party barrier, and it is with MOAs. There's a MOA trait right here, and it's like if your MOA uses their F2, it does a barrier on your teammates. And you can do like barrier swap to another MOA, barrier again, and do like a double stack of barrier on everybody. But it's nothing compared to like Scourge or Mechanist or Spectre. But it is something, it is a tool you can use if you want it. So I don't know what the value of, I don't know what number of barrier we're going to get there.
Celestial Avatar is something you're lacking, which can feel pretty bad, and the ability to get into Celestial Avatar is just not there compared to other supports, so a lot of these are aimed at taking care of that. Glyph of the Tides, it's now going to knock down instead of knock back in PvP. Glyph of the Tides was problematic before for decap druids. Turns out when you give knockbacks to things that can be pretty tanky, they'll just be as tanky as possible and use a knockback to decap the point, which can be a very effective strategy sometimes. It is very, not very engaging and unfun to play with. So this skill had a very long cooldown for what it did because of that. So we are, in PvP only, it will knock down, and we're reducing the cooldown. In Worldly World and PvE, it'll continue to knock back. We know that the knockback from this skill does have a lot of interesting applications, so it's staying there. Then we can move on to Glyph of Unity. This was a skill.
The thing is, though, if Glyph of the Tides becomes a 25-second cooldown and it does a knockdown, okay? And you, in PvP, you're choosing, do I want to bring that? Or do I want to bring Glyph of Equality, which has pretty much the same range? It does a 2-second daze, so it still gets them to stop hitting me, but it also is a stun break and it also gives stability. You're never going to... I can't imagine you're going to take Tides over Equality unless you're bringing both. Because it's just simply worse.
That was pretty homeless. Outside of Celestial Avatar, it kind of gave you that old retaliation effect, which was ostensibly to build up Celestial Avatar energy, Druid Fluid, if you will.
They owe me royalties. I dubbed it Druid Fluid like 6 years ago. They owe me royalties for that.
But it wasn't really needed for that.
There's also Ellie Jelly that Catalysts use, if you haven't heard that one.
When you were in Celestial Avatar, it would kind of copy your healing, but when you're in Celestial Avatar, you don't really need more healing. You have a lot of healing there. So this is going to be completely reworked and renamed Glyph of Burgeoning. When you are outside of Celestial Avatar, it's going to heal nearby allies and grant you Astral Force. So this is going to be, I need to be in CA now, but I need Celestial Avatar juice, and I'm going to press this button. So it's going to heal people and then get you there so you can heal some more. When you're in Celestial Avatar, you don't really need that healing, so you're going to give allies barrier instead, some more damage reduction, and also grant them endurance. So supporting against some other ways that aren't just, healing your allies when you're in Celestial Avatar, and we'll get into that when we talk about a trait. I think it's on the next slide.
Cool. I'm particularly interested in hearing more about that Druid Fluid you mentioned, but we can maybe get into that after
what else are you supposed to call it? It rhymes. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, love rhyming.
He likes it. He likes it, chat.
Absolutely. Very cool.
Here we go. First page of actual Druid things. Celestial Avatar, it's getting its cooldown slightly reduced. This is a change we're going to keep our eye on. It was at 20 seconds for a reason. Druid can be pretty scary when it's not being a support, but it's becoming a side node bunker. But we felt like if we wanted to give support Druid a chance, we want to do this change.
So, real quick, Astral Form, basically like the Druid signature thing, the ability to go into Astral, has a 10-second cooldown in PvE and World v World. Now, the bar still has to be full, but it has a 10-second cooldown, so you're usually waiting on the bar. In PvP, it has a 20-second cooldown. So sometimes you're waiting on the bar, and other times you're waiting on that 20-second cooldown to come up before you can essentially use your Druid-specific weapon swap. So they're making it in PvP going from 20 down to 15.
And see how it plays. If it doesn't end up, might go back to 20, but, want to give it, go out on a limb, see what happens. Rejuvenating Tides is also a pretty big change. It's no longer going to be channeled, and its radius is increased from 240 to 300. Rejuvenating Tides it honestly didn't feel good to press. Its healing wasn't as good for a channeled skill, and a lot of contemporary skills were not channels. So this is it's still going to be an attached water field around you, but you just press it, and the water field is there, so then you can combo.
So real quick, Rejuvenating Tides is this. It's very weak healing per second. It also does Alacrity and Might Ticks, but it's a water field and you can't combo it yourself unless you like start doing that. Actually, no, I don't even think that works. But you can't blast it yourself because you have to channel it. Like you have to be holding down the button. You can't do anything else. In PvP, if you're running the Eclipse trait, it also does Chill. So sometimes you might see a druid that you're fighting against start doing that for just like one tick just to get chill on you to mess you up for a little bit. And then they'll immediately cancel the channel and then do something else because, chill alone without damage isn't going to kill anybody. That's interesting. The radius is like 240 radius. Sometimes you wouldn't be giving Might or Alacrity to someone just because they're a hair too far away. So seeing that radius increased even a little bit is nice. I wish it was more, but I'll take it. Having it not be channeled, that's definitely pretty good, because that means you could like go into Astral, you could hit like 4 and 2 at the same time, and then like 3 or 5 while the 4 is channeling and the 2 is going off.
With some other things like the 3 skill Lunar Impact, get that blast from your own water field, and hopefully the radius itself should also be better to get some healing out of this skill.
Will it gain a cast time? Doesn't say. I'm assuming it's instant and then it's just there.
Druidic Clarity, increasing the radius 300 to 360. Talked about normalizing the things to be just a bit bigger. Cultivated Synergy, this is going to be a pretty big change, where it is moving to the Grandmaster tier.
So real quick, Druidic Clarity is a trait that when you go into astral form, it cures condies from teammates. So if you are running this trait, it got a little bit bigger.
And then when you use a healing skill, instead of just doing that heal around you and your pet, it's going to heal around your pet and create a water field attached to them. And then you're going to have a passive that whenever you blast a water field, you're going to grow a Seed of Life at the location. So it's going to give...
Wait, what? Hold on. So Cultivated Synergy was in the bottom tier, and they're moving it to Grandmaster. So it used to be, when you use your heal skill, you also heal allies around you and your pet. So basically, your heal button became a bigger heal on teammates right there. So now it's Grandmaster. When you use a heal around your pet and create a water field attached to them. When you blast a water field, you grow a Seed of Life at that location. Seed of Life being, what, Astral 2? Hang on. Yeah, so Seed of Life does it's a light field for like 1 second, and it does a heal. It's a small heal. Condition Cleanse on allies, and a blind on enemies. If you're running Eclipse... Actually, no, you couldn't do it with Eclipse because it's going to be competing against Eclipse. Okay. So, 3 Condition Cleanse on allies in PvE, plus some healing, plus a blind on enemies whenever you blast a water field. And blasting a water field will be easier because this is going to make your pet make water fields, and then this is also going to be a water field. Well, it already is, but now you can blast it. Staff 5 is also a water field.
Give you some Connie Cleanse when you blast those water fields. You have that 4 now that you can blast pretty freely. You're going to have the one around your pet. Healing Spring if you use that. Staff 5, listing all the healing fields, or the water fields. But should be pretty interesting. The Seed of Life right now is just a...
I'm waiting to find out which Grandmaster we're losing. If this is going into Grandmaster, then something that's there already is getting moved. I'm guessing the next slide will tell us.
Seed of Life that you use while you're in Celestial Avatar, but it is not going to be a light field, because it would be annoying if you were blasting your water field and then suddenly you were blasting a light field because it popped up. But other than that, so this one's kind of just get some more Connie Cleanse as a Grandmaster trait. We'll go into which Grandmaster trait it's replacing. That'll make more sense on the next page. But the last
not just leaving an empty slot.
Thing here is Blood Moon. Talking about things that are kind of annoying when we talked about the side note is that the days on entering Celestial Avatar, it was just kind of unneeded from this trait. Blood Moon already, just from its passive, does a lot, and we didn't feel like the days on it was fun to play around. So we're making...
You know what's not fun to play around? Full counter on Spellbreaker, and it dazes more frequently, and it is unblockable, and it hits more targets, and it has less of a cooldown than this. That's not fun either. Get rid of that.
Being sure that that's not... a thing you have to worry about anymore. We feel like Blood Moon itself is still a very strong trait that can stand on its own. Hopefully, removing the days feels better to play against Druids as well, because that's also an important aspect.
All right. Moving on, next
Then
slide.
we can move on to the last page of Ranger changes. This would be pretty exciting, especially for PvE. The important one is Grace of the Land is being moved to the Master tier.
There it
This
is.
is going to...
Grace of the Land is the trait that allows a druid to give alacrity. It's the one that we're required to take. So if you're a support druid, you have to take that. If you're Condi, you have to take that. Lingering Light is very fun, but fun's not allowed. No one is ever allowed to take this. So they're moving this down to Master. They're moving something here down here, and then this is getting reworked and going up here. Which means a lack DPS druid is just been born. Ranger is possibly the only one of the base 9 classes that cannot be an alacrity DPS. Gale Shot's quickness, and Soul Beast is nothing. Untamed is quickness, and Druid could not alac DPS. And seems like they just made that.
To enable a quickness, or not quickness, sorry, and a DPS alacrity build for Druid. That was a previous problem, is that Ranger itself didn't have a DPS alacrity build. And that was due to a lot of, DPS Druid existed, but a lot of it was because of Eclipse and the passive it gave. And we felt like Eclipse was a pretty solid Grandmaster trait. It made sense to be Grandmaster and moving it.
Yeah, so Eclipse is right here, and basically just turns all your heal stuff into Condi stuff. So you couldn't take that and alacrity at the same time. So that's why.
It wouldn't be great. So we're moving Grace of the Land to be a Master tier. So you're going to have your choice now. DPS can go for Eclipse, but also supports can now get Lingering Light or the new Grandmaster trait to have like a more fun healing trait while also applying alacrity. But we can go back to the top. Celestial Shadow, Radius Increase, Standardizing Radii. Verdant Etchings, this is moving to the Adept tier where Cultivated Synergy was, and it's getting a bit of a tweak. It's still going to apply protection when you use a glyph, but only while in Celestial Avatar form. When you're outside of Celestial Avatar form, your glyphs are going to heal people. This is, again, we talked about having healing skills outside of being in Celestial Avatar, so now your glyphs can help shore up people. And then when you're in Celestial Avatar and you have the healing, you can still apply that protection, that damage reduction when you need it. Natural Balance is no longer going to grant concentration. This is going to stay the DPS trait. That's,
Natural Balance. Let's see. Upon entering and leaving Selly form, deal increased damage and increased boon duration for a brief time. Yeah, so plus Condi damage, plus Condi duration, plus concentration. Yeah, this one, it's like if you're a DPS druid, this is just required. Like, this is more for PvP and World v World. You're going in and out of invisibility. This is the one related to Prot, and this is the one that's just DPS. It's a pretty boring one. I'm also still bitter that the icon is a shoe because it used to give run speed, so that it being a foot made sense, but it doesn't anymore. Kind of like how this looks like an ancient seed, but it's no longer ancient seeds. But that's a minor thing.
There to balance the Grace of the Land for the alacrity. And then Lingering Light, this is going to be probably the trait that most support druids take, if not the new Cultivated Synergy. So it was very strong on its own for, what it was.
Lingering Light, I have said in multiple videos over the years that playing Lingering Light Druid feels like playing Druid the way it was meant to be played. It makes it so much more enjoyable, but you can't because then you can't provide alacrity. Like when I did that Let Me Solo Heal series where I was trying to be the solo healer for every single raid boss, and see how it felt. I was running Lingering Light, and then we had a quick DPS and an alac DPS in the group during that experiment. Lingering Light, basically, the more healing that you put out while you are in the Avatar form reduces the cooldown to go back into Avatar. So basically, the uptime of how often you're in Avatar is much more frequent because this shaves down the cooldown.
Because in PvE, you couldn't really take it, you needed the alacrity. So now the maximum stacks are going to 10 to 5. So you're still going to get that discount. It's not going to be a full discount. And then PvP, they're getting that 5 seconds off that the difference would be just baseline. So if you have this trade, it's still going to be that same reduced recharge. So hopefully Druid, two big notes are that in PvP, hoping to aim for support to be viable, and in PvE, also making that DPS alacrity build possible.
Would you say this is more of just kind of reworking some stuff to make those builds you mentioned just feel better and easier to play, or just are they just also like straight up buffs and it's just kind of making those specs or roles stronger?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it is just making things work better and feel better. I think in PvE, some of these are certainly are buffs, but I don't think it'll be like huge. That we thought that Druid power level itself was pretty decent. It's just like some of those builds just weren't able to be played. We know in War v War Druid is still pretty strong. We're definitely going to keep our eye on these changes. We know that it is a very popular pick, and our goal is not to make it even stronger. So, based on the preview, might have some downward adjustments based on feedback, but we are monitoring there. PvE, like we said, we're keeping an eye on the side node Druid, something that we don't want necessarily get much stronger, but we do want to make sure that there's room for just pure support Druid to be a thing and something people have the option to explore.
Cool.
As a Druid main, that's really exciting. It truly is. Like I've got the full list of changes here. We'll go over them later. But Staff 2 being a button that might be worth pressing and easier to use is nice. It's it's a Staff 2. It's a very minor heal, but it's nice that this doesn't feel like it's just a waste of a button press. So I'm happy about that. Like this, I don't think this is going to make alignment useful in most places, other than some really niche situations. Same with Unity, but have to try it out. Tides rework, okay. Avatar getting a 5-second shorter cooldown, that's great. Avatar is kind of the fun button for Druid, so getting to use it even 5 seconds more frequently that's great. Rejuvenating Tides being instant sounds amazing. I assume it's just you tap it and then it still does the persistent field, because he said the field stays around you. So I don't know if it has a cast time or if it's instant, but after you do it, it's just there pulsing around you for the next 4 to 5 seconds, which whether you're Condi and you're using it for chill, for soft CC, or you're the heal one and you're just firing it just to keep those boons on your teammates, because it does might and alacrity, as well as some minor pulsing healing in the water field. Like that's just nice. So that seems really good. This pretty minor, but okay. This one, I can't imagine I'm gonna try it, but I can't imagine using this over Lingering Light now that we finally get to run Lingering Light. But we'll give it a shot. Sad to see this go, but okay. Selly Shadow. Selly Shadow is the thing where when a Druid leaves Astral Form, they stealth themselves and nearby teammates for 2 seconds in PvP. So if you're ever PvPing against a Druid and you occasionally see them like blink out of existence and you lose your target and then they come back, it might be this. There's a few other tools that the Core Ranger has that can go invis, like Longbow 3 or Spear 5, but that's something that most Druids take in a PvP setting because the other stuff in that column are not great. Verdant Etching is kind of weird. So the thing with Prot in PvE is typically you want to keep it up 24/7. You always want your team to have Prot. It's one of the most powerful boons. So you do not want to just be like, oh, I'm saving this glyph for doing this thing in non-astral form, but also I'm burning the glyph to keep Prot up when I'm in astral form. It's like, no, it's one or the other. It's like, this is either a button I mash on rotation to keep the boon up, or it's not, and I can use it as I need it. So this one might be more interesting in PvP, if it's worth taking over the other stuff in the same column. Natural Balance, this doesn't really hurt because this was something the Condi Druids took. Grace the Land getting moved enables Alack DPS Rangers for the very first time ever. Lingering Light getting slightly nerfed because it's becoming easier to take it. I totally understand. Basically, in PvE, your Astral Form has a maximum cooldown of 10 seconds. And this could take it from 10 seconds to 0 seconds. So all you had to do is refill the Druid Fluid, and then you can get back in. So if you could refill the Druid Fluid in 3 seconds, you could go into that form again in 3 seconds. So this makes it down to a maximum of 5 out of 10 seconds. And then some minor buffs to Soul Beast and Gale Shot. This is cool. Yeah, as a Druid enjoyer, I am looking forward to trying these changes out. Because some of them I'm unsure of, and some of them sound nice, and I would like to see it.
Awesome. All right, as you mentioned, I believe that's it for Ranger. So moving on to everyone's favorite blue class, Guardian. I believe Cal will be taking this one.
Yeah, I could talk about some Guardian stuff. So the first page here, why not? We might as well. We are here. We can also skip it. But we'll cover the Guardian stuff. So a few changes here at the start. We've been making adjustments like this to a number of the symbols where they don't need to have, but we'd like them to have some initial value attached to the skill, because the symbols are still good, and in some modes they're less reliable. They're not going to get the full damage or the full effectiveness of standing inside of it. So we want there to be some initial value such that if you aren't able to stand it the whole time, you're still feeling pretty good about the skill. So we see here Symbol of Swiftness.
Okay, so I kind of get what they're going for here. So in World v. World, battles are constantly moving, and it's very common that, if a Guardian is, the support for their group or their blob, whatever the size of the party is, and they throw down a symbol on the ground, it might only do 1, maybe 2 ticks before they move out of it, or you might put it right in front of you, so you maybe get a 3rd tick as you move through it, but you certainly are not getting the full duration. In PvE, it is much more often that the full value of all your symbols will hit your party. So they're putting super speed on, like Symbol of Swiftness grants pulsing swiftness, which is run speed. Super speed is more run speed. So they're putting this on the first pulse. I'm guessing it's just going to be 1 or 2 seconds, but it doesn't say.
Getting just a little bit of super speed on the initial pulse there. Cooldown's going to go up in PvP and World v. World because Staff as a whole is already a pretty good weapon in these modes. Symbol of Swiftness is kind of the least exciting of those skills, so we are giving a little bit of a power bump, but trading off with a little bit of an increased cooldown as well. Symbol of Vengeance, now going to give it to inflict daze on the initial strike. This is no longer tied to a Firebrand trait. We'll get to that note later. This is now going to be available for everyone. We obviously saw this weapon is pretty good for Firebrand because you have access to the daze on Symbol of Vengeance, but for everyone else, it's generally unplayable, unusable, not very good. So we felt that putting that daze on there would just make it a bit more accessible to every Guardian specialization.
Tabe says Verdant Etching feels like it was the sacrificial lamb of this change. Honestly, Verdant Etching has always kind of sucked. Because it's like, Verdant Etching currently is if you use a glyph, your team gets 4 seconds of prot. It's always been kind of terrible, but it was in a column where it was like, I guess I'll take it. Because you would normally, Stone Spirit is a lot of prot. Or, what was that other one that was attached to the Invigorating Bond? That's a lot of prot. That's 12 seconds of prot. That's over half your prot uptime right there. So just having this, 8 seconds with concentration, 4 seconds without prot is like, okay, but this does nothing for a PvE support, and this does pretty much nothing for a PvE support. Because there's concentration there, but you can't keep it up, so you need to get concentration capped without it. So Verdant Etching has always been kind of terrible. So if it's going to be the scapegoat, then all right.
And again, just a little bit of a cooldown bump to compensate for that power level increase. Symbol of Energy, getting an initial bump similar to like the Resolution symbol on Greatsword. The initial strike will do increased damage. This won't actually be a DPS increase in PvE. We've reduced the pulsing symbol so that it should be exactly the same amount of total damage. PvP and World v. World, it will be a little bit more damage overall, but again, if you are locking someone in that symbol for the full duration, you probably deserve that damage increase. It's just going to be a little bit more on the front half of shoot the projectile, land, explode, get a nice little bit of damage, and then we'll have that pulsing as we already do. Hunter's Ward, nice little kind of usability improvement for PvP. The ring duration being 5 seconds. It's a powerful skill, but we felt that it's so infrequent that shifting a little bit of the power down 3 seconds is still pretty good CC. And now it's going to be available more frequently. So we're hoping that it is just a little bit more of a...
That's the baby gates, right?
Exciting skill. Longbow, Symbol of Energy getting above. We'll see some Dragon Hunter changes as well. We'd like to see a little bit more longbow.
Yeah, that's the baby gates. Hunter's Ward is the Dragon Hunter skill. It's a Longbow 5, where they rain down arrows, and then a second later, it looks like baby gates appears around each person, and unless they have stability, they can't get out of them until it runs out.
And here are the Dragon Hunter changes.
Yep, a good chunk of Dragon Hunter changes here. We see some healing numbers going up, Wings Resolve. This is the healing number that other game would...
Okay, I'm surprised by this. I feel like the Dragon Hunter Wings of Resolve heal was already substantial. I'm surprised that they're buffing that.
Use already, PvP getting a nice little buff there. Purification, just a little bit of a bump here. It is a pretty strong heal between the heal you get when you place it, the heal you get when it gets triggered, and then also the regeneration on top. But this should make it just a little bit more competitive with other healing skills that have been kind of improved. Signature Resolve, much better skill than it used to be. So we're hoping that Purification is a little bit more exciting for Dragon Hunters. Test of Faith, we're really pushing the kind of CC, the combo-centric aspect of the skill, where it feels pretty bad to take a lot of damage just for walking through the skill. We've seen this in the past on a lot of other skills, like Ring of Fire, back when the pass-through burn was pretty significant. It didn't feel like there was a lot of I mean, you can obviously still play around it, but it's not necessarily where we're happy putting that damage. We really like the combo aspect of Dragon Hunter with like the spear pull or the shield knock, or the just all the different combos of knocking someone or pulling someone through your Test of Faith. So we are reducing the damage and then really increasing the bonus damage against controlled enemies. As you see, the 200% damage increase. This will be the same number.
Whoa! Increased damage bonus against controlled enemies by 200% in PvP. Wow. Okay.
On that CC'd damage number, while just reducing the amount of damage that you feel like you take somewhat randomly by walking through the Test of Faith.
Right. I think that's important to point out. I see a lot of reactions from chat that 200% is a big number, but the total damage you get from being CC'd through it is the same as it is now. It's just that when you walk through it, or just it just clips you, it's going to do a lot less damage then. So this should feel a lot better to play against than it does now.
All right, so rewarding the Dragon Hunter combo, but not punishing players quite as much when they're not getting CC'd.
We can see the math here. 1.88 times 1.33 will give you some number that may or may not be equivalent to 0.833 times 3. Should at least be pretty close.
We do love numbers.
Yeah, moving on. Procession of Blades, Dragon Maw. These are two skills that are kind of related. We've seen in the past Dragon's Maw got nerfed pretty significantly in PvP, and a lot of this was due to just the ability of Dragon Hunter to place a Procession of Blades and a Dragon's Maw kind of off in the distance and then go do things.
So I feel like the number one thing here for Test of Faith, which I don't know that it's dead, I just haven't run into it in a long time, is when a Dragon Hunter would put down the ring and then shoot the chain at you and pull you in. So you're controlled as you're getting pulled across the edge of the ring. Then they'll hit you with the knockback and knock you back across it a second time. So if you fall prey to that combo, it's gonna suck. But if he pops the ring and you're just in it, and then you just like walk out of it or dodge out of it or something, and then it, taps you, it's going to hurt you less than it used to. That's what I think I'm seeing.
A pretty punishing playstyle. Especially at certain levels in PvP that we saw, and we feel like Procession of Blades is kind of more of the problem there anyway. So we felt that we can hit Procession of Blades pretty hard, make it so it's not going to be the most powerful skill. It still does a decent amount of damage if you stand it the whole time, but it's not going to be that super powerful, like huge burst of damage that it is right now, or even was before. And that gives us a bit more comfort in bringing Dragon's Maw back down. Not quite where it used to be, but it is going to be more available. This is one of the more iconic skills.
I mentioned earlier how Ranger has such a very small amount of stability. There's the elite skill, but it has a cast bar, and so instant stability was only on, I think, Soul Beast, because these patch notes are adding stability to Glyph of Equality for Druid. So Dragon's Maw as a Ranger main was like often a death sentence. If I managed to get caught by that, I could not get out of it. Yeah, it was like if I was running Greatsword, I could just channel block until it had run out. But if they shot like an unblockable arrow or something, I couldn't do anything. So this is going to make that more frequent for me.
Of Dragon Hunter is the Dragon's Maw, being able to get that big CC, set up a lot of your other skills. Maybe we're not as happy with Procession of Blades being the big payoff there, but getting a nice combo off inside your Dragon's Maw. We're hoping that this shift of balance makes Procession of Blades feel a little bit less overpowering in some cases, while also giving Dragon Hunter availability for that really strong moment with Dragon's Maw. We see a couple of trait changes here, just fleshing out a little bit more of Dragon Hunter's defensive traits, especially Hunter's Determination. This is like a really interesting trait that hasn't seen a ton of play, so we're adding a little bit of endurance on that. This is still going to be all of your elite skills stun break, but also they will now give you a little bit of endurance, and that is going to play into the update to Hunter's Fortification, which will, in addition to when you block an attack, this will also trigger when you evade an attack, and those will actually be 2 separate cooldowns. So if you block an attack, that'll go on its 2-second cooldown, but then you can evade an attack within that 2-second window. That'll still trigger it, and then that'll go on its own 2-second recharge. So there's a little bit of a buff here to make it a little bit more potent as a defensive option, and a little bit more of a flexible defensive option. This has obviously been pretty strong in the past with things that create a lot of Aegis sources or a lot of blocks. Now it's going to be a little bit more consistent for builds that are not leaning as heavily into those blocks.
Nice. Quick question: what do you think is better, blocking an attack or evading an attack?
Which one is better?
Yeah, which one's better?
It depends. It depends. If you're trying to block a Prime Light Beam, you still get hit by the Prime Light Beam. You have to evade that one. It depends.
Both pretty good.
That does not answer my question. We'll check back in on that. Thank
I
you.
generally like evading attacks,
Okay.
but I think the classes I play don't have as many blocks. So.
Dodge enjoyer. Gotcha. Bias.
I do like
enjoyer.
dodge. You know, dodge is kind of the heart of the Guild Wars 2 combat system. So.
Okay.
What is heavier, Roy? A pound of feathers or a pound of steel?
It's obviously steel. Come on, chat, back me up on this. All right, moving on.
Uh-oh.
Got some Firebrand and Willbender trait changes.
Yep. So here's the note I talked about before. No longer going to inflict daze on Symbol of Vengeance, and we are bumping up the bleeding duration because trait would be pretty bad in PvP and early world without that. Trait's obviously still fine in PvE, so this is just a. Again, the goal of this change was to shift the daze onto Axe as a core functionality, so that other elite specializations or Core Guardian could feel good about using Axe. And then power for power, nice little damage bump here. This is another case of power landed a little bit lower than we were hoping, and so here's a little bit of a damage boost to bring it.
Increase Willbender Flames damage bonus from 100% to 200% in PvE. I mean, at least it's not PvP, I guess. Like, I mean, if it's not really a huge deal to me if one class is doing a bit more damage than another class in PvE, as long as all of them are kind of close together. In PvP, I would like flip my chair over this. Like, that would be very upsetting. Willbender has never been underpowered. Willbender has been various. There's a spectrum of overpowered, and Willbender has been all over that ever since it came out. It's like it's been flavor of the month for the last like 14 months or something. So if it's PvE, fine.
And I will say, like, our goal with a lot of these damage bumps is not to like increase beyond our targeted goal for like where DPS builds land, but there are a lot of cases where these builds landed below kind of our target. So we're not looking to go back 200%
increase
pre last patch where we brought everything down, but we are expecting that most builds should land a lot closer to each other, and there's a lot that didn't.
Gotcha. Cool. Seems like we have a lot of, obviously, some targeted sort of Dragon Hunter changes, but that doesn't really seem to be making it, a specific build necessarily enabled. A few PvP changes there. Maybe just kind of some better utilities, some better quality of life there. Are we kind of happy with where Guardian builds are right now, and we're kind of just looking at some usability improvements? We're not really trying to force any new roles or buff any particular specs?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I'd say.
Cool.
Guardian is quite good.
We do love Guardian. All right. I believe that will wrap it up for Guardian. So moving on to everyone's favorite green class, we've got Necromancer, and
he said Ranger was everyone's favorite green class.
I believe is going to take this class. He does love green specs, so
I see axe buffs. So
I do see
I
axe
know it's a
buffs.
balanced patch.
Well, yeah, I can't wait to see the
I guess
Shatterstone
talk
buffs,
about the axe and the focus. These are basically their cooldown reductions getting rolled in baseline from the trait, which we'll talk about in a second. So these are around 20%, give or take. Life Siphon here. Basically, the heal effectiveness while you're bleeding is getting rolled in baseline, especially in PvE or when there's supports around you. Sometimes you inflict bleeding on yourself and you're like, oh, I'm going to heal more, and then they remove it from you and you're like, oh, I'm healing less. So it's kind of a moment that didn't feel great, so we're just rolling it in baseline because the skill was basically bounced around it anyways. So should feel better to press Life Siphon in those random situations. And then Oppressive Collapse. A few skills, when you try and press them, normally when you press a skill, it'll try to turn and face your target and then use the skill. But some skills, if you weren't facing your target, it'd just get mad at you and be like, we're not doing that. So Oppressive Collapse was one of those, and we're now changing it to work how every other skill does. So should feel a lot easier to use Oppressive Collapse. If you take your hands off the movement keys and press it, you'll turn and use it. Yay.
And that is a technical reason.
Wow. Spinal shivers actually like gives me shivers. Like, it's scary. Spinal shivers is a focus skill for Ranger, and if they hit someone with it, they take damage based on how many boons they had, and it like removes a bunch of boons. And having that available every 16 seconds, ooh, scary.
Right? Is the skill getting mad? Versus the skill.
Yeah. It actually gets mad at us, and we have to make it feel better.
The alternative was to pop up like an angry face when you did it, but we figured we would just fix the skill.
It had an attitude adjustment.
Oh, okay, nice. All right.
Yep. These also some miscellaneous changes. Taste of Death. We are reducing the Blood Fiend health sacrifice from 100% to 50%. So you will not kill your Blood Fiend when you take health from it. Only a little.
Oh, I misunderstood. I'm glad I'm watching this. See, I read this and I was thinking that meant it would give you half as much healing. But they're saying it will no longer kill the pet. So before, if they were using the summon heal skill, you summon the Blood Fiend. And when you hit the button a second time, it killed the Blood Fiend and gave you a sizable heal. And then when the cooldown was up, you had to resummon it again. But now it won't guaranteed kill. Dude, that's actually really nice.
Little bite from it. A lot of this...
And also the Blood Fiend's attack heals it and you a tiny bit every time it attacks. So it can recover some of its own health as long as nothing else kills it. Oh, Epidemic too? Oh my gosh.
You know, now you can use on-heal relics with it, so you can use more if you have some blood magic.
Corrupts 8 boons? What? Oh my god, dude, just make me immune to boons, buddy. I mean,
Trades are able to heal your Blood Fiend. You can use it twice before it dies, or you can use it even a third time. So Blood Fiend getting a little bump. It was tired of people just killing it when they got tired. Epidemic. This is a bit spicy. Epidemic has had a history of being a very strong skill. It has had some very strong nerfs to it. But
okay, really quick, for anyone who hasn't been playing Guild Wars 2 for that long, Epidemic, you got a target. Let's say target 1, and they got a bunch of dots on them. You hit them with Epidemic, and it does copy, and then it targets all the other enemies nearby, and it goes paste. So it's like, if you got 100 bleed, now all of these guys have 100 bleeds, right? It was the power of the... It has gone through numerous nerfs to where, like, okay, well, they're copied, but they're half strong. Oh god, it's still OP. Okay, they're copied, but they're 40% strong. Oh god, it's still OP. Okay, because imagine, like, you're just running a group, and it's got, like, 3 DPS Necros. And the boss is there, and then ads come into the room, and all the DPS Necros just hit Epi, and it's like, 500 Condis hit all the ads, and they all just die. So there was so many fights that were trivialized by how original Epidemic worked, and they kept nerfing it to the point where it was just heavily nerfed around the time End of Dragons came out. And they kind of had to do it because certain fights like Canang Overlook had multiple bosses, and Epidemic just trivialized the fight, and it made it to where people would only take Necromancers. So it looks like now they're revisiting, giving it a little bit of power back.
We like Epidemic existing, and we want to make sure that there are still some use cases for it. So we are, before it was 25 stacks, now it's 5.
Epi bouncing. Oh yeah, I didn't even cover that. Yeah. So if you've got a target with 1 million Condis, and then you would use Epi, and it would copy all that stuff to this guy, and then hit Epi on this guy, and it would copy it all back, and the original target now had double the dots. Yeah, multiple Necros could Epi bounce, and that was also crazy.
Numbers in between that. So surely bumping it up a bit, we'll find the number where it kind of rides that line. Because right now, Epidemic wasn't really that strong. Again, we want to make sure it's something people are interested in using. So bumping it up to 8, keep an eye on it. Corrupt Boon, also something, we want to make sure that when you get hit by Corrupt Boon, it feels really bad. And when you use Corrupt Boon, it feels really
Corrupt
good.
to the
Boon
moon.
should be a turning point skill. And so we're increasing the number of boons converted from 5 to 8. That should hit a lot of them. So Corrupt Boon really angling to have the skill used by more condition-oriented Necros, some Terramancers. Should see some interesting play. Like Epidemic, it is an iconic skill to Necromancer, and want to make sure those iconic skills are being used.
I will say this. I appreciate iconic skills. Back when they nerfed Epi into the ground, and also when they nerfed Corrupt Boon into the ground last time, I believe I said that I hated those changes. Because, like, Corrupt Boon... Now, the Corrupt Boon button flipping 8 boons into conditions is crazy. I think that might be a little high. But I do want Necros to have Corrupt Boon, because things like, the pull, the Corrupt Boon, the Epidemic, like, those are unique things that not everyone has. And so I do want them to have them, but you just got to keep in mind, the many Necro weapons already Corrupt Boons, and then this is an additional thing on top of it. Maybe the justification is the fact that this takes up a utility slot, so you have to give up a stun break, but that is quite powerful.
Cool. I love to see if we can come up with more numbers from between 5 and 25 in the future. We'll see
Yeah,
if we can
this
find
is
but,
in
5 and 25.
old,
There's a max of 13 boons in the game, Roy. Come on.
Skills and Balance team saying at ArenaNet that there's, and this is paraphrasing an old skills team designer, but there's a number between 1 and 1 million where the skill feels right.
Very fair.
I don't know if Epidemic will get up to 1 million though. We'll
shooting for the
a
moon
little
there.
bit too high.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. Continuing on.
Spiteful Talisman, that's what we were talking about, where the cooldowns are getting rolled baseline, and now this trait is getting kind of split functionality, where it's going to increase your strike damage baseline, and then it's going to be further increased against a boonless foe. This kind of, we're putting a lot more boons on things in PvE to make it more interesting for boon rip, but sometimes when you have a large damage bonus locked behind them being boonless, it can feel bad to play around sometimes, so we're making sure that you still get...
So currently, Spiteful Talisman increases your damage against boonless foes by 5%, and then it has recharge reduction on axe and focus. But now the recharge reduction is getting baked in, now increases strike damage baseline and even more against boonless. So there was no bonus damage on this trait before now, other than the boonless thing. So it's going to have more damage on it.
Some value. You still want them to be boonless to keep identity of the trait, but it's not just fully hosing you. Then we have some death magic changes. Dark Defiance, it's getting reworked and renamed to Dark Defense. This is just so we can change the trigger on it. When you're being disabled, that's not really a trigger we like anymore, so now it's going to operate when you use a healing skill. You're still going to have that passive that protection reduces incoming condition damage, but you're also going to get protection and carapace when you use a healing skill. Corruptor's Fervor, this was a trait that before it gave like full pulsing protection when you were above the threshold, and that was just very strong. And we were like, okay, how do we nerf it? And we made it so it wasn't full uptime, but it was really weird because you touted like 50% of the time, and it was just very random. So now it no longer gives protection. It's going to grant its own unique damage reduction while above the health threshold. So that way we can still have it full uptime, something you can count on. It's just not going to be as strong as protection would be.
That means, though, if you got protection, it was stack with this. Because if this now has an independent damage reduction, that means it's going to probably stack with the boon. So if you can get protection from another source, you're going to be way tankier than you used to be.
Do note that it does now stack with protection. So if you have, if you take Dark Defense, use your healing skill, and then have this bonus, you're going to be reducing even more damage than you were before. So hopefully finding a way to make it feel better to play around and with. Soul Eater, this is just a very small buff in PvE. It was one of those profession specs that we were talking about that landed just a bit lower than we like. This shouldn't be anything too big. And then Manifest Sandshade, we are increasing both the cooldown and the duration from 8 to 15 seconds in PvE.
Ooh, I like that. Oh man, there's a running joke around Scourge that it's like, yeah, it's really easy to play, but you're going to get carpal tunnel. Scourge, it's like, if you're like, Muck, how do I play this? And I'm like, oh, it's really easy. Just mash this one key 1,000,000 times per second. Oh, that's really easy to explain, but I can't do that. I can't do 1,000,000 clicks per second. Scourge is kind of like that. It's like, there's a bunch of keys, hit them when they light up, and you're going to be a force in nature, but you're going to have a sore wrist by the time, like, you've played for an hour. So just making this to where it's a longer cooldown and longer duration is great at tackling that problem.
8 seconds. If like you were constantly pressing the skill, it was just a bit too fast. So now 15 seconds. It doesn't feel like you're always having to manage keeping your shade up. It should hopefully feel better. 15 seconds of what is in the competitive modes, we feel like it works there. So should feel better to play Scourge, like you aren't constantly micromanaging your shades.
Very cool.
And then the last thing for Necro, we have Harbinger.
Oh, the Russian.
They are reworking their Grandmaster tier. They were pretty boring before. It was, you're going to pulse something in Shroud. What would you like to pulse? And we can do better than that. So Cascading Corruption is being reworked. It is now going to be a trait that works around consuming your Blight. When you consume Blight, you're going to gain yourself stacks of this Cascading Corruption, and then when you reach the stack threshold, you're going to explode. Something we like doing before, getting stack threshold. So when you explode, you're going to do damage and increase your damage for a duration. This is going to be both a condition damage and power DPS trait, so if you're going to be a damage harbinger, you're going to look for this one. They didn't really have to be separate, we're combining them into one. Elixir of Risk, you're seeing a buff to it before, or above this. It's getting its cooldown reduced and both power increase and now going to inflict torment. We want this to potentially be a DPS skill that you use. And, elixirs are going to help consume, so you're going to reach the stack. You're going to consume more Blight, get more stacks, so hopefully some synergy between Elixir of Risk and the specific Master trait. Deathly Haste, being reworked, the end result is going to be the same what it is now. You're still going to give people quickness at this measured pace, but hopefully with just a bit more control. You're going to grant boons to allies when you enter Harbinger Shroud and when you use Dark Barrage. It says boons here because it is no longer going to give quick.
Yeah, so I don't think this is going to be terrible, but it will slightly change the rotation. So before, when there was I would often tell people that Harbinger was one of the easiest quickness DPSs to play, because just by being in Shroud, you just farted out the quickness to everyone around you. But now they're attaching the quickness to a button in Shroud, and so every time you click that button, you will push out the quickness. So as long as the duration on the quickness application is enough to make up for the fact that the cooldown on the button, it should be fine. But that does change it a little bit.
In a world versus world, Harbinger supports were something we didn't really like the gameplay style of. They like sat in Shroud and pulsed quickness to everyone and then didn't really do anything themselves. We'd rather it if players have more agency to what they're doing. And a build giving quickness like that just really isn't something we were interested in. So no longer going to be able to give quickness that way in World v World. In PvE and PvP, these are still going to give quickness, and hopefully, numbers, making sure that the uptime is the same. You will be able to do around the same loops to get the same amount of duration. This is just making it a bit more active than just pulsing. Then lastly, we have Doom approaches. This one is going to make your Blight reduce more of your health and accumulate faster while in Shroud, and in exchange, your Shroud skills are improved. So this one is intended to be pretty risky. Harbinger, its Blight health reduction has been slowly reduced in a lot of game modes over time, but with this trait, we want to increase the risk again to go back to that philosophy. This way you can opt into it. So when you go in Shroud, your health is going to become a lot lower, a lot faster, but the skills shall be stronger. There are things like Dark Barrage is going to shoot more missiles.
So super quick rundown here for anyone here who's never played a Harbinger. Harbingers don't have the second hit point bar that Core Necro has. When a Harbinger uses their Shroud stuff, they gain a stack of Blight. And for every stack of Blight that they have, their maximum hit points is reduced, but they get a whole bunch of buffs for having it. Now, often the pros outweighed the cons. It's like, okay, yeah, it's like I lost... let's just make up a number. Let's say 20% of my effective health, but my defenses went up by more than 20%. So it's fine, whatever. It wasn't a huge deal, and it didn't really change the gameplay by having your max health reduced. You still felt about as tanky as you did before. And since Necromancer is the class that has the highest base hit points, even with max stacks of Blight, you were still 1.5 Weavers, maybe even 2 easily. So it looks like they're trying to raise the risk and reward here.
The 3-skill Devouring Hut is going to corrupt boons. Voracious Arc is going to inflict fear. The Vital Draw, larger radius. So hopefully, it's going to be someone's doom, whether it's yours or the enemy's. That's to be told. But
one of us is dying.
And hopefully, Harbinger Grandmaster is a lot more interesting to play with.
Doom is inevitable.
Yep.
Kind of similar to Guardian, it feels a little bit like, we're not seeing sort of a role sort of being targeted here in terms of a buff or a nerf. We're kind of just seeing some usability improvements, obviously a lot of specific Harbinger usability improvements here. But would you say kind of similar to what Kyle was mentioning with Guardian, where, we're kind of happy with where a lot of the Necro specs are, and we're kind of just trying to make them feel a little bit better to play with?
Yeah, I think as a whole, we really like where Necro is in a lot of places. It's now we're tackling pain points like Harbinger Grandmasters, for example. We've known for a long time that they're not very interesting, so taking the time to rework them to be something that people can get more excited about.
Cool. Awesome. You love to see it. And what else we love to see is some engineer changes. Here we go. I believe this will be Cal. And I mean, as you said, kind of with
there's so many icons.
The axe changes on Necro. This
They've got every turret icon down here.
Would not be a Cal balance patch if we didn't have some toolkit adjustments.
Is that a thing? I didn't know that was a thing.
I'd say so.
Anyway.
I'd say, yeah, it's kind of your love child at this point.
Engineer changes. Healing Mist. Elixir Gun Tool Belt. The cooldown is 5 seconds lower than it used to be. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And we looked at Elixir Gun, and we've made some improvements to this over some recent updates, and we feel that all the Elixir Gun skills themselves are in pretty good spot. But we're still not seeing a ton of Elixir Gun, especially in PvP where it used to be a really big thing. So we wanted to bring down the cooldown of Healing Mist a little bit. This skill isn't the most powerful, but especially as a tool belt skill, it's fine to have a weaker, lower power level skill that is just a Sunbreak, and the Sunbreak is kind of the most exciting aspect of that skill. So we're hoping this gives just a little bit more interest in Elixir Gun. Similarly, we see some Mace improvements here for PvP and World v World. This is trying to lean into a little bit more more bruisery engineer builds. We see this especially with Amalgam or Scrapper, or kind of the more bruiser focused elite specs thematically. Obviously, Hollowsmith Mechanist can play these builds as well. We'll see some trade adjustments in this direction as well. So these were kind of after we did the trade adjustments first and figured, okay, Mace actually makes a lot of sense with these bruisery trade updates.
I think part of the reason they're doing this is the go-to weapons for a heal engineer for a very long time was Mace Shield. That was after Mace was added in End of Dragons. But then when Shortbow was added in Soto, most engineers just swapped to Shortbow. So it looks like they're trying to give the Mace kind of a new niche here with this bruisery idea that they're talking about.
So just a little bit of a small damage increase, small stun duration increase, trying to make it a little bit more appealing in competitive modes. Similarly, we see some toolkit slight improvements. Pry bar, pretty powerful skill. Reduce the cooldown a little bit. Now it's going to be, set up with your box of nails. Obviously, you can immobilize with your box of nails and hit a pry bar. Magnet sets it up pretty well. Throw wrench again, small cooldown reduction. Skills hit pretty hard, but just making them a little bit more available could make these builds or make these a little bit more exciting as utility skill options. And then we see a final note here at the bottom for all of the turret skills. They will now go on. You'll see a overcharge skill recharging once you place it, overcharges automatically. That functionality hasn't changed. You'll then see the overcharge cooldown kind of ticking down, and then you will be able to manually reactivate that overcharge once the cooldown has elapsed. So,
okay, so really quick, for the non-NGs, when an engineer puts down a turret, it will do something extra flashy like instantly, and then it's like its power level kind of tapers off, and then it's just consistently doing whatever until it dies or you replace it. And then if you hit the button a second time, you would like self-destruct the turret. You would like detonate it, whatever it is. So like the healing one, right when you put it down, does like a bigger heal, but then it just pulses like regeneration like a sprinkler until you detonate it. When often you would just put it down, get the overcharge, detonate it right away, and that way it goes back on cooldown so you could do that again because the sprinkler mode wasn't that good. But they're saying that you can do the overcharge again manually after a cooldown. I'm wondering what is going to be the button for that. Like, is it going to be over the self-destruct button? Like the self-destruct button will be there, and then once the manual overcharge button becomes available, it just replaces the self-destruct button. So then if you wanted to destruct it, you'd have to tap it twice. I'm not sure where else that click would go.
Adding a little bit more active gameplay to turrets, and also eliminating the need to blow up your turrets to get that overcharge effect again. We're going to see.
Yes. I'm not an engineer main anymore, but I would like to see that also. In the history of Guild Wars 2, at the very beginning, turrets were undoubtedly overpowered. Like an engineer at a node with all his turrets down was like a little fortress. And they were a threat. They were actually quite deadly. And, you had one that would throw nets on you, others that would just flat out kill you because their damage was scary. The healing turret was actually doing a noticeable amount of healing on the engineer. Now it's just they're nothing, right? They're hardly anything because they were nerfed. They were like nerfed, and then 5 more nerfs just to be safe. So if they're trying to get it back to the point where, like, if you use a skill, the best thing to do is not simply summon it and self-destruct it instantly. I like that because I like seeing the turrets and stuff like that. I kind of disliked that optimal gameplay was summon them and then self-destruct them right away, so you never really saw the things.
Displays, so we think it could be potentially a pretty interesting update for turret skills.
Cool.
And then we see kind of the inventions updates, trait updates here. Cleansing Synergy getting some regen. We'll see a little bit of regen on Bunker Down as well. The Grandmaster Minor trait gives you the increased power and healing power when you have regeneration, but there's not a ton of regeneration sources within the trait line themselves. There is obviously that one option in the adept slot, but we felt that there should be at least a little bit in a minor trait because the minor trait playing into a minor trait makes a little bit more sense. But then also just a little bit more regeneration, more of that self-sustain, ally sustain. We see some protection duration going up just a little bit. Again, increasing some supportive elements, some personal defensive elements. Bunker Down was the big one where bandages are not going to give you regen, so a little bit of extra sustain, extra regen source for those trait synergies. And then we'll also see that the mines will inflict a vulnerability. So this is kind of the definitely the Bruiser Grandmaster trait where it does some defense, some offense. We're really increasing kind of the power on both halves of that because the trait hasn't seen a ton of play since we.
Oh my god, I love this one. Okay, Mecha Legs was called Mecha Legs because it used to make your legs run faster. And then they took away the run speed from it. And it was the stupidest thing. It was kind of like that Ranger trait I was complaining about earlier that still has the icon of a boot because it used to give run speed and now it's just something completely different, but it still has a boot icon. They're bringing back the movement speed to Mecha Legs.
Reworked it to trigger on disable rather than on just hitting on any skill. There's some other small updates here. Mecha Legs, bringing that movement speed back. This is still going to have the resistance functionality, but just having that resistance, the trait was not quite strong enough for the Invention trait line. We've seen success of resistance on dodge in other trait lines, but Inventions obviously doesn't have like the same access to the traits are different. There are some traits that are the same, but then the rest of the trait line is different, so you can't say one-to-one that this trait is fine on this class, so it's perfectly fine here. Needs a little bit of extra help here in the Inventions trait line. So it is getting that movement speed back on top of the resistance on dodge. And then we see Sapping Device. This is a new trait replacing Auto Defense Bomb. Just another trait that we don't really like the mechanic of dropping a smoke bomb when you get disabled. Now it's going to be a little bit more active, still going to be more of that damage reduction effect as you're going to weaken enemies when you immobilize or disable them. So some nice little defensive tool updates. I would love to see some inventions, Amalgam or Invention Scrapper, Invention Hollowsmith. These type of more, like I said, bruisier builds be a little bit more effective.
All right, very cool. And that will wrap up the engineer changes. So we can move on now to Mesmer.
Everyone's favorite purple class.
Mesmer.
All right, so first phase here, we see staff cooldowns. These are cooldown reductions being rolled in from traits. Mesmer, the main focus, we're going to see some pretty sizable chaos trait line shifts, I think, and things that go along with it. So these are just, the staff trading chaos cooldown reduction getting rolled in.
Cool. Very good.
Then the next page is going to be pistol.
So just double checking here. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is all just staff ability cooldowns reduced.
These are just, the staff trading chaos. But that trait didn't have baseline. So the bleeding from the pistol trait is getting rolled in. So that way you can use pistol without having the trait and still feel like it's a pretty good conditioned weapon, which a lot of the time it's used. Duelist Discipline will still have that condition damage, or that cooldown reduction, sorry. Part of it on Interrupt, we felt like that was pretty interesting to play around, and on some of the passive, just baseline cooldown reduction, so it's keeping that. So that's what Duelist Discipline is going to be, is pistol skill cooldown reduction on Interrupt. They are baseline getting reduced just to give it some more oomph behind it, and hopefully pistol becomes a lot more used in places we're not seeing it. I think PvP has fallen off a bit, and PvE as well. Not a lot of builds are opting to use pistol, so we really want to make sure that it's up there in an option. Then we can go on. More offhand changes. The Prestige Phantasmal Mage, getting some cooldown reductions. This is more to go with another Chaos trait we'll talk about in a bit, making sure...
No, Mesmer's going to go invisible more often. No.
Wanted as opposed to Shield. We see a lot of Shield usage. The block is very good, but, Stealth is also a pretty good skill. Phantasmal Mage also.
I was using Blade Pistol. You still can, Comanchic. Hold on. Let me reread this for Comanchic. So, Duelist Discipline used to give all pistol skills bleeding. Now, they just put the bleed on Phantasmal Duelist by default, and you don't have to take this trait for that. However, it looks like they didn't add it onto Magic Bullet, but you no longer have to take this trait if you just want Phantasmal Duelist to bleed at targets, which was the primary source of the bleed.
A bit, and offhand changes, the Prestige Phantasmal Mage, getting some cooldown reductions. This is more to go with another Chaos trait we'll talk about in a bit, making sure Torch is, wanted as opposed to Shield. We see a lot of Shield usage. The block is very good, but, Stealth is also a pretty good skill. Phantasmal Mage also hits pretty hard if you tank it, so... Blade Call, this is like how we're talking about Oppressive Collapse, how this was a skill that wouldn't face your target, and it felt kind of off. So now Blade Call, when you're not facing your target, just stop moving, press it, face you, yay. Signet of Domination, we are doing some adjustments to this skill. Right now, a lot of the time in PvE, it is a skill that sits on your bar and you never want to press it. But we want to make sure that it can be used as a utility tool. You're still going to have to sacrifice that condition damage for the builds that want it for condition damage when you use it. But now the cooldown going from 45 to 25, that is a lot less. So it should be a pretty good skill to press. We're also reducing the stun duration from 3 seconds to 2 seconds, just making sure it's not too crazy. But on top of that, it's also going to remove boons from the target. So it's going to be a skill pretty similar to Throw Mine and a lot of its utility. So you're going to get that stun and remove the target and remove boons from the target. In competitive modes, it'll be a pretty good opportunity to do a lot of damage if you land it, and in PvE, it's just, boss has boons, boss has a break bar, you can press this. I'll lose some damage, but that's worth the trade-off. So hopefully more interesting decision points around it. And Veil, in PvP, only getting its cooldown reduced to 30 seconds. This is a skill that is a lot better in PvE and World v World game modes. It doesn't have a lot of use cases in PvP, so just lowering the cooldown to something pretty low.
So Veil, hang on a sec. Veil creates the wall that grants stealth to you and your allies. And they're reducing it to a 30-second... Okay. So it's a utility skill that allows them to stealth themselves and allies for up to 2 seconds. And they're making it go from 72-second cooldown to 30. So 2 seconds is not a long duration stealth, but, if you do that at the right time, it could win a fight if, the enemy all lose their targets for a moment.
To see if, there's ever a time where you want to use this. It didn't really warrant the 72-second cooldown, so just trying to do it some justice there.
Very cool, very cool.
But then we
You think that more skills should be like Throw Mine, Taylor?
Maybe not fully Throw Mine. Throw Mine has a lot of things going for it, but, Signet of Domination needed a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here we can see... we have one trait that's not in Chaos, Vicious Expression. We talked about this before with Spiteful Talisman on Necromancer, where if they had boons, you'd lose a lot of the damage. So now the strike damage, some of it's becoming baseline, and it's going to be further increased against boonless foes. So on some of the bosses that get boons pretty frequently, you're not going to be like, wow, I just can't play Power Mesmer against it. You are going to take a bit of a DPS decrease because we still, again, want to keep the identity of this trait, but just not as punished. But then we can talk about Chaos. Method of Madness. The Lesser Chaos Storm is no longer going to inflict daze, which will allow us to heavily reduce the cooldown of Lesser Chaos Storm in competitive modes, which will be good for a trait we will get into in a second.
75 seconds to 35 seconds, but it no longer has days on it. Okay. All right.
But there's going to be some shifts. Chaotic Interruption is moving to the Master tier, and it's going to take place of the Staff trait, which is going to be completely reworked and called Shaper of Chaos, a new Grandmaster trait. It is going to function with Chaos Auras, where so it's going to be a Chaos Aura trait. When you grant yourself a Chaos Aura and you already have Chaos Aura, you are instead going to cause your Chaos Aura to detonate, which is kind of confusing, but basically if you...
Isn't that how, like, Luminary works? Like detonating light fields? Or light auras?
If you apply 2 Chaos Auras to yourself, you will do damage around yourself. It's going to give you the boons that Chaos Aura gives and also inflict conditions on nearby enemies. So this is going to be a condition damage focused Grandmaster, which was something Chaos was really lacking. We really want to make sure that if you take this trait line, it feels good, you have an interesting playstyle, and it further shores up its condition damage focus. So this is going to naturally synergize with Staff itself, as you have Chaos Aura there, and you have Chaos Storm that you can then leap finish through. Going to be pretty good with things like Barrage, jaunting through a Chaos field is going to give you this Chaos Aura. So there's a lot of way you can trigger this rapidly. It is important to note that the second Chaos Aura has to come from yourself. We didn't want to worry about things like other Mesmers giving everyone Chaos Auras into a trigger just way too much.
Full Mesmer group spamming Chaos Auras.
Not gonna have a Staff trait
1 million
anymore,
detonations per second.
a more generic trait that Staff is just really good with to hopefully build that power fantasy in the trait line. Similarly, Prismatic Understanding is another Chaos Aura or Chaos trait line trait that is getting buffs. It was pretty bad, to be honest. The stealth increase is pretty good in some niche scenarios, but everything else around it was not great. So Prismatic Understanding will keep the 50% increased stealth duration. So this is all on top of it. It's now going to cause Shatter Skill 4 to grant stealth. So normally Distortion, sometimes a Harp, it's going to grant you stealth. That's pretty nice defensive. You're already going to be distorted, but getting that ability to reposition or drop aggro, what have you, is pretty nice. But on top of that, it's not going to grant random boons while in stealth. It's going to grant specifically regeneration upon entering stealth and protection resolution upon leaving stealth. So you're going to enter stealth and get regeneration, have a moment of reprieve. There's also some regeneration hooks in the trait line, so that's pretty nice. And then when you exit stealth, when you're back in the thick of it again, you're going to get protection and resolution for some damage reduction to make sure you have that more sustain that Prismatic Understanding was meant for before. And it's going to pair nicely. We saw Torch cooldown reduction buffs, Veil buff if you want to use that for the most stealth possible. But Stealthy Mesmer is coming to you soon.
Yeah, a lot of additional stealth or better stealth sources in this patch with Thief and Mesmer.
Yeah, it is a good question there I saw in chat. Prismatic Understanding, the duration increase will only work from Mesmer stealth sources as it does now, but the boons when you enter and leave will be any stealth source.
Cool. All right. And then we got Virtuoso.
Last thing for Mesmer is Virtuoso. This is changing where the unblockable is. Unblockable is something we think Virtuoso, really needs to perform in some scenarios, but Psychic Riposte was just way too much. And we did a lot of thinking, and we felt like the triggers we like putting on traits, none of them were proper for what we wanted the unblockable cadence to be. So we're shifting it to a utility skill. Psychic Force is getting a bit of a rework in what it does. It's no longer going to be that CC that knockbacks enemies or breaks stun, and instead will cause your next blade song to be unblockable. So we're increasing the damage on it, so the strike around you is going to do a lot more. And then we're also increasing the ammo count. So this way we can have a lot better control over how often Virtuosos can make their blade songs unblockable, and also ask them to commit a bit more resources to getting that ability. And we think that it'll make Virtuoso playing it and playing against it feel more healthier, that you now know better the cadence of how much they're going to get that unblockable, but they still have access to it, so they're still viable in situations like World versus World.
As if I can understand anything that's happening when I'm fighting a Mesmer. There's like 1 million clones they already shattered that are still being rendered on the field, 1 million more phantasms running around, and just purple crap flying all over the place.
Awesome. All right. I think, as you mentioned, that'll wrap up Mesmer. So we've got to our final class here.
All right. I'm actually kind of scared of this section, chat, because here's the notes for Ellie. It goes from here all the way to here. So I think we're going to be here for a couple of minutes.
Elementalist, which means I think we're about halfway
Save the best
done.
for last.
A
Save the
lot
best
of
for
LE
last.
changes, a lot of slides here. So yeah, we've got
There are a lot of slides.
lock in for these LE changes, and I think we're going to shake things up a little bit. And actually, Taylor's going to start us off here with some of these numbers
I'll cover
adjustments.
We're gonna
first
split
part.
them because there's quite a few slides.
Once we get to a certain part, there's going to be a lot to talk about, and then I'll let Cal rant about that.
Yeah, he can do
The
his
first
spiels.
part, these are just damage increases. After the balance pass, we noticed a lot of elementalist weapons not being where we think they should be. So we see here Fire Sword getting increases. If we go to the next slide, we're going to see a lot of hammer skills getting damage increases. And then after that, we're going to see a lot of dagger skills getting damage increases. There's not a lot to talk about for the specifics. It's just we think these weapons should do more damage, so we're making them do more damage. After the hammer and the dagger, we'll see spear as well, just getting some slight damage increases. As well, Inferno is also getting a small buff. Again, Inferno, very powerful trait that
Hang on.
we'll see some increases.
I want to hear
Those
this
getting
again.
damage increases. We think they should be. So we see here Fire Sword getting increases. If we go to the next slide, we're going to see a lot of hammer skills getting damage increases. And then after that, we're going to see a lot of dagger skills getting damage increases. There's not a lot to talk about for the specifics. It's just we think these weapons should do more damage, so we're making them do more damage. After the hammer and the dagger, we'll see spear as well, just getting some slight damage increases. And as well, Inferno is also getting a small buff. Again, Inferno, very powerful trait that we thought, we want to make sure it's used. After our changes, it became just a little bit too weak, so buffing it up
Next
a bit.
slide, Roy.
Yeah, if you want to go to the next
Yeah,
slide. Yep, there
just
is.
giving people a moment to, to really
Also,
digest
I know we're going
the
fast.
numbers changes.
When we finish the stream, as we said, the note will be on the forums for people to check out for anything people miss. But
there-
The gist of
that
the changes is, Scepter landed pretty well in a lot of cases for what we were hoping, but a lot of the other LE weapons and even Inferno.
As a non-LA who frequently has to fight against LEs, I still think giving Dragon's Tooth aimbot was a terrible change, and I hate it. That's it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
The Inferno builds did not really hit where we were hoping. So,
Yeah, I noticed
like with all the other changes, the goal is just kind of bring them more in line with other options.
I noticed all of the power coefficient changes on the elemental slides we've seen so far have just been PvE only. Are there any weapons that we feel like are under or overperforming in any of the competitive modes that we were looking at all with this patch, or we're kind of happy with where they are, or we want a little bit more time to kind of see where they're landing?
I think in competitive modes, I know in Warfare Support in particular, Spear is very powerful. And again, reiterating something we talked about at the beginning of the stream is that a lot of our competitive specific changes, more for downward adjustments, are not fully ready to be shown yet. I know we went over Ranger Untamed was another one that a lot of people were a bit of question marks that things were missing. Wanted to make sure people know that we're aware of these, that we do plan on adding some changes. They're just not quite ready to be shown yet. And I know Spear Catalyst is another one we have our eye on specifically.
Cool. All right, so moving into the PvE number adjustments, I think this is where Cal can take over.
Yes, I will talk about Weaver. There's actually a lot of Weaver changes, including there's a new skill that there's an icon that no one would recognize here on the slide. But so kind of the main goal for this page is talking about a lot of stance updates. Our goal for stances is that most of them, Primordial stance is still going to be an ammo skill, but we felt that the ammo component of a lot of the Weaver stances was not really adding a lot of depth or not really adding a lot of gameplay. It was just kind of there. And obviously it affects the power level of the skill, whether or not it has ammo, but we felt that the stances were forced to be a little bit less impactful than we'd like, just because they do have ammo. So our goal here is to really pump up a good amount of the stance power level, but bring them down to 1 ammo, just a little bit more controlled, and hopefully some more exciting mechanics here. So we see aquatic stance. Obviously healing goes up, endurance goes up. The stance bonus has changed. Instead of being the ally heal, it's now going to give some endurance back every time you dodge. It's obviously not going to be a full dodge, but you will be able to generate additional endurance, so you will be able to dodge more frequently.
Well, yeah, of course. Of course they can't give you back a full dodge per dodge, because then you could just dodge forever.
And this was kind of the ability to heal allies is not something that Weaver really should be doing from our perspective. It's always been more of that like selfish, super glassy in some cases, but more of that personal DPS. There's some
they're
personal
high
defense,
DPS,
obviously, but it's not really supposed to be a support class or a support spec. So this time I felt a little bit out of place. So as we were looking at stances, we felt that we could do something a little bit more interesting with the bonus, refunding some endurance and dodge. Twist of Fate. This skill didn't really have a stance effect tied to it. It just did its thing. There was no persisting stance bonus. So now we'll have a persisting stance bonus that will prevent movement impairing conditions from being applied for the duration. It will also remove those movement impairing conditions on activation, and of course reducing the emission from 2 to 1, as the skill is now a lot more powerful. Stone Resonance, this is going to now also grant you protection in addition to its previous effects, and also increase the effectiveness of protection on you for the duration. So a nice little defensive damage reduction skill. Barrier can come up a little bit in PvP. There's something that got hit pretty hard between the 2 ammo and the trait trigger. It generated just a bit too much barrier for like those tanky Weaver builds, but now that there's only going to be one source of this, or one ammo of this skill, it can come up a little bit. Definitely be keeping an eye on this. To make sure it lands at kind of the right place. Unravel, the skill is no longer available as a utility skill. It's been replaced with Fervent Stance. We are reducing the ammunition from 2 to 1. That might come into play later. We'll get to that on a different slide. But you can no longer pick Unravel as a utility skill. But you can now pick Fervent Stance, which will give you quickness, fury, and swiftness on activation. And then for the duration of that stance, it will grant you might every time you use a dual attack skill. So more of that personal, like big damage. You see these quickness skills on a lot of professions. They're usually pretty big moments, pretty impactful moments, and we thought that Weaver would be a good place to put that as we were looking to replace Unravel.
Yeah, just a point of clarity. Some of these have pretty high cooldowns to account for their ammunition. Are we planning on reducing them when we make them only 1 ammo?
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of... I don't know how they missed the slide. They probably missed the preview post as well. But there will be cooldown adjustments in a lot of these cases as well.
Cool. Good to know. Very good catch. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, moving on to more Weaver skills.
All right, so now we got a lot of updates to dual attacks. There's a lot of dual attack skills that haven't been updated since they were first added to the game, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are definitely a lot of them that feel a bit dated in terms of like whether it's power level or just quality of life of the skill. So we'll see, here's the staff page, but we'll see a lot of updates to dual attacks on a lot of weapons, just as some sneak preview. So Pressure Blast. This is a staff skill. This had just really difficult to use because it would heal allies as the projectile passed through them. Now it's just going to do its explosion at the landing point, and that's going to be where it heals allies. It's also going to give yourself a little bit of additional healing when you strike an enemy, so this will allow you to kind of double up on the self-heal. If you are next to an enemy and you throw the Pressure Blast at your feet, hit an enemy, you will get the healing from the explosion as well as the heal from striking an enemy, so it could be a nice little sustaining skill for Weaver. We see the healing numbers going up, casting time coming down, just a lot of usability improvements on top of making the skill just a little bit more powerful. Plasma Blast, projectile speed increase. We'll see that in a number of places where there are quite a few very slow projectiles on Weaver dual attacks, and they're just a bit too slow, so they will be a bit faster. Lahar, this is going to get a bit of a power increase here. The first pulse of the skill will now immobilize enemies. It's not going to be a pulsing immobilizer or anything like that, but it will give you a little bit more of that crowd control at the beginning of that skill. We also see Monsoon getting a pretty significant rework here. Instead of being like kind of that weird pulsing regen skill, we're going to have just a nice little knockback that's going to inflict some debilitating conditions as well. We get the chill, we get a good amount of vulnerability.
Okay, but I think what we're all asking right now is, what about Haboob?
And that's just gonna be a nice little
What
CC.
are we buffing about
staff,
Haboob?
more intended to be that a lot of AoE damage, a lot of crowd control, so we felt that there were some cases where we could add a little bit more crowd control to this weapon to really flesh out that playstyle. Moving into Scepter, we'll just see some, again, nice little improvements to Scepter skills. Fiery Frost, going to get a little bit more of evade distance. It was a pretty short evade, not necessarily something that you like on your ranged weapon. You want to create a little bit more space. This will also remove those movement impairing conditions on activation, so nice little escape skill on Fiery Frost. Glacial Drift, again, increasing projectile speed. Now going to add a Daze on that. Nice little utility bonus there. Stun duration up on Earth and Synergy, and Stone Tide going to get cripple on the first pull. So similar to Lahar, but not going to be that full immobilize. It's going to be a cripple to, again, give you a little bit more opportunity to create space on Scepter. We have some dagger updates. Steam
So
Surge,
many Weaver slots.
the field duration is going up. That's going to give you a little bit more opportunity to blast finisher or combo finisher in that field. And obviously the healing is attached to the pulsing field as well. So this is also a increase to the amount that this skill heals. And then we see a very slight damage increase. This isn't really intended to be a big damage skill, but we felt like it could come up a little bit as we were looking at just improving the skill as a whole. Katabatic Wind. This is getting a kind of a mini rework where right now the skill just comes out very quickly. It does that Daze, does a little bit of damage. We felt that it comes out just a little bit too fast. It's not really reactable, so we don't want to put a lot of damage on the skill or a significant Daze on the skill. So the way that it works now is that there will be kind of 2 parts. You'll still have that very quick initial explosion that'll do a short Daze and a little bit of damage, but then there will be a second delayed hit that will do additional damage and a longer Daze. Ashen Blast kind of getting a similar functionality shift here, where it's going to become a 2-part skill. Same idea, where the part of the skill that needs to come out quickly is the blind, but that kind of limits our opportunity to put damage and burning on the skill because we don't want that unreactable high damage skill. So instead, this will be a 2-part skill where you will swing out a burst of this Ashen Blast that will do low damage and blind, and then you'll follow up with a second hit that will do more damage and do that burning. Then we see a little bit of a trait shuffle here. Elemental Polyphony. This gave kind of a temporary vitality boost, not something that we're a huge fan of. So we've shifted that over to the minor master tier trait. Will now also give you vitality in addition to the barrier trigger. And then Elemental Polyphony will instead give condition damage as the Earth Attunement bonus.
Very nice.
Still a lot of Weaver traits to talk about.
Wait, there's more.
So we've seen Weaver traits are kind of in this weird spot where some of them are really good and some of them are not really good, and then some of them are very low power because of other traits that exist. So that's kind of what happened here. We see Weaver's Prowess and Swift Revenge as the master tier DPS traits are both getting reworked into things that are not DPS traits, and that's because Elements of Rage, you look at the number on this Grandmaster damage trait, and it's like a tiny damage bonus just because that's where it has to be to make Weaver balanced. But we felt that we could add a little bit more utility into the master tier slot here, bump up Elements of Rage, which we'll see on the next slide probably, and then really make it so you have that highly impactful, strong Grandmaster trait without blowing out the overall power level of Weaver. So we see some stuff shuffling around here. Elemental Pursuit instead of just going to get a full rework here. Swiftness on disabling enemy and increased swiftness effectiveness. This is something that used to be on Woven Stride, but we'll see that trait change. There's a lot of Weaver trait changes, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but now we're going to see Elemental Pursuit a little bit more controllable here by making it only on disabling an enemy. So we felt that we could put a little bit more value here as opposed to having that internal cooldown on the trait before, because it was super speed and it was sourced by quite a few different things. Obviously, the inhibiting conditions as well would trigger it. So now it's going to be a little bit more consistent, but not have that internal cooldown. And the swiftness will still be pretty relevant as we get further down the trait line. Superior Elements, getting a little bit of a crit strike bonus. As a spoiler, Elements of Rage will no longer grant precision because it got some other new functionality. So this is just kind of balance out that crit chance, make sure that it is still about where it needs to be. We still have so many Weaver traits to talk about, so I'm going to take a quick water break mid-slide. Unfortunate.
It's okay. I think you've done a good job so far, Cal. I'd say you've earned it.
There's a lot of
I can sign off on
Weaver
this water
updates.
break. A hydration break, if you will.
Please hydrate. It's pretty hot here today. Okay, Weaver's Prowess. This trait has moved. It is now in the bottom add-up tier slot. It will grant you resistance when you attune to a single element, so the same trigger that we do use on Elements of Rage. We think it's a pretty cool trigger, but it's not really used anywhere else. So Master's Fortitude, that trait also getting reworked. We don't really need the vitality there anymore because we've now put the more consistent vitality bonus on the minor trait. So we felt that there's more opportunity to do more reworks there. So having the more interesting, potentially very powerful resistance source in that slot instead. Then we see Master's Fortitude moves to that slot that Weaver's Prowess used to be in. That's now going to grant you barrier when you dodge, which might sound familiar. That trait used to be a Grandmaster trait that has also been reworked that we'll get to soon. It's just something that is not super interesting as a Grandmaster trait. This is a common theme in a lot of our trait reworks over this patch and patches over the last year or two even, is that we see, there's a lot of traits in the game that are fine power level wise, but they're just not interesting. And especially on the Grandmaster tier, we're looking for those traits that give you either playstyle shifts or like very powerful moments, and Invigorating Strike's really not one of those traits. So as that trait's getting reworked, we still like the barrier on dodge. That is something that is valuable for more defensive focused Weaver builds, but it's not a Grandmaster trait. So it's now, now it's a Master trait. And last up, we have Swift Revenge. Again, getting that full rework. This is going to grant you additional bonuses. These are personal bonuses when you use a dual attack based on the elements. Obviously, dual attacks have 2 elements, so you will be getting 2 different bonuses for each time you use a dual attack. For example, if you use a fire-water dual attack, that will grant you might and also remove a condition from yourself. And we see air giving some swiftness and endurance coming from earth dual attacks.
Honestly, that sounds really neat. I like the idea of this.
And again, a nice little best combo. Yeah. Depends what you're looking for. Water air will be pretty good if you take Woven Stride.
Yeah. What are you looking for?
Obviously pretty good. What am I excited for?
I said, what are you looking for?
What am I looking for?
Yeah.
I haven't seen the spider. I haven't seen the spider for a while. So just keeping an eye out. But again, like I said, the Master tier is a bit more utility focused because there is going to be more damage coming out of the Grandmaster slot. So our goal with these, just to be clear, our goal with these changes is not to reduce the overall damage that Weaver deals, even if there are fewer specific traits that say your damage is increased in some way. But let's move on.
Last but not least,
we have
final slide.
3 Grandmaster traits, all getting some amount of shuffling or adjustments. So here's Elements of Rage, no longer giving their precision. We've rolled some of that into other traits, superior elements. Now you're going to get access. Unravel is back. It's no longer available as a utility skill, but if you trade into Elements of Rage, you will now get an additional profession skill, which will be Unravel, which is the same skill that you guys all know and love. Our thought process here is that Unravel is a really interesting skill. It's like probably one of the most interesting skills that Weaver has, but it's also very specific, and it's like so hard to actually justify slotting over something else in the utility slot. And there are fringe cases where we have seen Unravel get a little bit of play, but it's really not a reliable, this is something I always want in my build at the cost of some other utility skill. So the idea is like, well, what if Unravel wasn't a utility skill and just got it as part of a Grandmaster trait? Plays really well with Elements of Rage, obviously. The trait that cares about you being attuned to one element now will always have access to the skill that says you are attuned to one element for a period of time. So this could give a lot of interesting rotational adjustments, like how are you going to play around having Unravel. Obviously, it's going to just be 1 ammo. It's not going to be 2 ammo, but it will be the single use of Unravel every so often. You can use that to really, fire off those really powerful slot 3 skills for, burning speed. You can now get access to your burning speed because you have access to Unravel. Pretty interesting stuff. We're hoping that it's pretty exciting in how it plays out as well. And then we do see the damage bonuses getting increased here because, we do want the power to be coming from Elements of Rage, the super cool Grandmaster trait, and not necessarily just the critical mass of damage dealing traits. Woven Stride, talk about this one next. This no longer has an internal cooldown. Previously, it did have an internal cooldown of how often it could cleanse conditions and how often it would give you conditions for being movement, getting inhibiting conditions on you. The thought here is that the internal cooldown had to exist because of the trigger that gave you swiftness, because it would otherwise infinitely cleanse movement impairing conditions from yourself, and that's probably an issue. But it does really reduce the overall strength of the trait as well. So we wanted to get rid of that internal cooldown, so it's also not going to have that baseline swiftness effectiveness. But that does mean that every time that you use an air duel attack with Swift Revenge, or every time you disable an enemy with Elemental Pursuit, it will trigger Woven Stride, which is a condition cleanse and regeneration on yourself. So now that there's actually less functionality here, but it's a much more powerful trait in the cases that you really want it to be, because you can now trigger it a bunch of times in a row. Powerful cleanse trait, some regeneration value as well, getting some sustain. We think that the trait is pretty interesting. It just needed this. This is essentially a very large usability improvement to the trait, which was previously not really usable. So, we'll see if people actually pick this up, if it actually plays as well in practice as we think it will in theory with the other trait synergies. Maybe it still needs a rework, but we think this trait's pretty cool, and we really want to see how it goes. And last but not least, Invigorating Strike, getting reworked and renamed to Flow State. Reduced recharge time of attunements and dual attack skills. The dual attack skill recharge will be this pretty standard 20%, which historically is not a thing that we find super interesting, but the attunement recharge reduction here is going to be a flat 1 second off, and that will stack the way that you want it to with the arcane trait line. And I will get ahead of it and say that when you are under the effects of Weave Self, this trait will not do anything to reduce the recharge time of your attunements. We felt that 2 seconds is kind of the floor, and Weave Self is like the really impactful moment and the really interesting moment already. So having that 2 second floor of Weave Self, but then whether you have arcane or not arcane, you will get a single 1 second reduction off of your attunement recharge time, which obviously gives you like a lot more depth or a lot more opportunity and like a lot more options in terms of how you actually flow through all the different attunements. So even if cooldown reduction traits are not things that we typically think are interesting, that's generally because we feel like they don't really add a lot to gameplay, and they just cause more problems than the value they provide. But with something like attunement recharge, that gives a lot more rotational depth or like interesting ideas that can be done with Weaver especially. So we think that this is actually a really cool and fun and interesting trait, even if it is just a cooldown reduction trait on its face.
Cool. I'd say, we're seeing, a similar trend through a lot of these classes, Guardian, Necro, now Elementalist, where I would assume we're not really trying to shift roles necessarily for Weaver, but we're seeing a lot more attention to Weaver maybe than like some of the other ones. It's getting a much, I'd say, bigger rework. A lot of these traits getting shifted around. Obviously, a new profession skill with one of these Grandmaster traits. Do you feel like Weaver was kind of left behind at some point, and it required a lot more attention, or is it just kind of the nature of Elementalist, where it has way more skills? Obviously, all the dual skills.
I feel like Weaver has never been fair, and there's 2 reasons. One is APM. Like a Weaver doing 30k, I promise you, is doing like double or triple the button clicks per minute than almost anybody else doing 30k. And the other thing is utility. Like a Weaver that's all in on damage is like every button on their, every like utility button is damage. Their elite they picked is for damage. All their specializations they picked are for damage, and all the traits choices that they made were for damage. And they're running like full berserker gear, and they're doing like the same damage as like a DPS Firebrand, but the DPS Firebrand can also like fart out stability or resistance or projectile block or a pull and do all these utility things from their tome while maintaining the same damage as the Weaver, and they're also much tankier, and they're having to press less buttons to do it. I feel like Weaver has never been fair. On the flip side, Weaver has a very high skill ceiling, and very rarely you run into like a Weaver who is good at the carpal tunnel gameplay, and they are able to just, you know, they're like a demigod in PvP. You know, it's just a blender of elements, and it just, you're like, what can I do against this? But those are few and far between.
All the different attunement skills and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of dual skills. Weaver, it's always been like good. You know, it's been hit or miss in PvP for a long time over its existence, where sometimes it's been very good, sometimes it's been not so good. So the power level's always been there, but I feel like there's been a lot of things that just, you know, haven't been updated for a long time, and that's not, again, not always a bad thing. Sometimes we are pretty happy with things, and that's why they don't get updated. But I think, like we saw in a lot of cases with either Weaver traits or Weaver dual attacks, these are things that really did need some either usability improvements or power level increases, or we just need more interesting traits in this trait line. So there are a lot of Weaver changes because we went into this patch saying, hey, let's take a look at Weaver. We actually found a lot of things that it's like, okay, well, there are a lot of individual skills and traits that we should be updating on Weaver. And
Cool.
so we did.
Awesome. We'd love to see it. Very exciting, though. A trait giving a new profession skill, I think, is a pretty unique thing here for.
Well, it's been done before.
Well,
Those
fairly
traits are
unique. We'll say fairly
not, you know, not for Elementalist, but
Yeah.
we do find that these traits are pretty interesting.
Yeah. And I think that actually wraps things up for us.
We did actually wrap things up.
Yep.
Indeed. Any final words or thoughts? I know we've obviously spoken a little bit. We mentioned, Taylor mentioned this. We got some competitive downward adjustments potentially pending after this preview. As always, we'll be looking at feedback from this balanced stream. As Calho said, we'll be posting all of the notes that you just saw to the forums at the conclusion of the stream momentarily.
I'm just going to post it right now.
Calho's gonna. Wow, we're doing it live.
Doing it live.
That's crazy. Holy cow.
Clicking the button. You guys can go read it on the forums.
I love reading.
I have submitted the topic. It is pinned in the profession section, as it always is.
Very good. All right. Yes,
Someone's
any
already
final
here,
words or final
so
words?
there you go. Any final words? You know, as always, we're really looking for feedback on this stuff. We obviously feel good about all the changes that make it at this point. There's a lot of things that get cut much earlier because they're just insane or, you know, bad or whatever reason. Once we get to this point, you know, we feel pretty good about the state of the patch, but we're always looking to make things better, and that's really where the community comes into play. I feel like I say this every single time, but it is just good to reinforce this, that, you know, there is so much depth to this game that a lot of the time there will be things that, you know, get missed internally, or there are other things that should be looked at internally, and that's really why we, you know, as much as it is just fun to be on streams and like talk to the community and do all that stuff, which I think is part of it, but really the important part of doing these streams and doing these previews is because we know that the patches won't be perfect, and, you know, they won't be perfect post feedback either, but our goal is to make the patches as good as we can, and we found that community feedback is insanely valuable to that end. So we do want you guys to go on the forums, you know, go on social media, give your thoughts, give your feedback. We'll be reading it. You know, we do make adjustments, and, you know, we don't necessarily action every piece of feedback, but we do read it all. And sometimes that ends up being things that we see and we can't do it for this.
Cause they can't possibly do every piece of feedback, because you got like Captain Crabface saying buff warriors, then you got Muckluck saying delete warriors. They can't please everybody.
This update, but it gives us ideas for a future update. You know, we really do. It's just a broken record here, but we do find the community feedback invaluable, and that's why we do these previews, really.
Absolutely. Very well said. Taylor, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I was excited to show the changes we had today, excited to see all the feedback around it. I think we have a lot of pretty interesting reworks in this patch. Weaver, pretty exciting, some of the Deadeye changes, the Warrior changes, so pretty exciting for this patch to come out.
All right, very cool. Yes, make sure you give your feedback. Thank you.
What is this? There's so many people in the chat that are copy pasting haha meow meow. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Everyone very much for tuning in and watching the stream. A little bit of a longer one today. We had a lot of stuff to go through and a lot of thoughts to get out there. So exciting times. And yeah, as always, forum post is already up. Cal is doing awesome work there. So please feel free to go and comment there. Give us your feedback. We'll be looking out for it. But until next time, as always, thank you for joining us. and we'll see you in the mists. Bye-bye.
In the mists. And done. Okay. Oh, man. That took a bit. That took a bit. And we were doing that at 1.25 speed as well to shave off, like, 30 minutes of that. So that was the proposed upcoming balance patch and all the changes that they are proposing doing. So next up is the TLDR section. All right. So, hello future YouTube. If you are watching this, then you have reached the TLDR section of this video. Maybe you skipped ahead or maybe you watched the whole thing, I don't know. But I'm going to do my very best to condense their 2 hours of talking into as small of a chunk as possible. So, quick TLDR here. There is some stuff for every class. Elementalist has the most of it. So the Elementalist section will take a few more minutes than all of the others possibly combined. So just letting you know ahead of time because it's the first one on the list. It is the longest one. The others are much shorter. So, first of all, Elementalist. Our previous balance update left a few LE weapons doing slightly less damage than we wanted in PvE. This update brings additional adjustments to sword, hammer, and spear to bring them more in line with other options. We've also taken a look at a number of Weaver's less impactful dual attack skills and traits, including many that haven't been updated since they were originally made. We found that a lot of these skills needed usability improvements or more functionality, and our goal for these changes is to introduce new options for Weaver players. There are multiple traits that were just before, they were like, increase damage by 5%, and they don't do that now. But there's a ton of other stuff they did that does buff damage, and they have said that their goal for this patch is not to nerf Weaver damage, but to raise it up a little bit and make some things more interesting. So if you're a Weaver main, all three of you, there will be some things that say nerf, but there's a lot more that say buff. So first of all these skills, I'm not reading all this crap. Power damage increased. All of that. All right? So there's a lot there. And I'll have links to the notes down below. All right. Weaver specifically. Holy Jesus. All right. These skills are ammunition skills. They're taking away the ammo. They are going to be just a normal skill with a normal cooldown now, and that cooldown will be reduced because it's no longer an ammo skill, because ammo skills have longer cooldowns. Additionally, they have increased how powerful these skills are because they are just making them like one powerful button instead of multiple weak buttons. So, Aquatic Stance, more healing, more endurance. Twist of Fate now also removes movement impairing conditions and prevents their application. Stone Resonance now grants protection and grants increased effectiveness of protection and more barrier in PvP. Unravel, reduced ammo count, but you can no longer put this in your utility slot. Unravel is now going to be baked into another skill that will occasionally give you Unravel, and we'll talk about that further down. And in its place for a utility, you've got Fervent Stance, which gives you quickness, fury, and swiftness, and you gain might every time you use a dual attack, which is the Weaver 3. Pressure Blast no longer heals allies when it passes through them, and instead heals allies where it lands, making this much easier to aim. It now also heals you when you hit an enemy, increased power coefficient from 1 to 2 in PvE, and from 1 to 1.33 in PvP and World v. World, increase base healing by almost double, increase the heal scaling by double, reduce the casting time slightly. Plasma Blast, faster projectile speed. Lahar, the first pulse of the skill will now immobilize enemies. Monsoon no longer does the regeneration thing. Now it knocks back enemies that it strikes and inflicts vuln in addition to chill. Fiery Frost increases the evade distance by double. They said that they want, it's on a ranged weapon. They want it to be better at getting you out of, melee range of the enemy. And now also removes inhibiting conditions. Glacial Drift, increased projectile speed. The skill now dazes enemies that it strikes. Earth and Synergy, increased stun duration by half a second. Stone Tide, the first pulse of this skill will now cripple enemies that it hits. Steam Surge, increase the water field duration from 2 seconds to 4. Increase the power coefficient in PvE and PvP and World v. World. There's the numbers right there. Katabatic Wind now will now perform a delayed second strike. The first strike will deal less damage and inflict a short daze, while the second strike deals more damage and inflicts a longer daze. Grinding Stones reduce cooldown by 3 seconds. Ashen Blast will now strike enemies an additional time. The first strike will deal less damage and inflict blind, while the second strike will deal more damage and inflict burning. Elemental Pursuit, this trait has been reworked to gain swiftness when you disable an enemy. Swiftness that affects you is improved. remember this because this will be related to another trait soon. Gain swiftness when you disable an enemy. Elemental Refreshment now also grants vitality. Elemental, I almost said polygamy. That's not what that says. Polyphony. This trait will now grant condition damage instead of vitality when attuned to Earth. Superior Elements increase the critical strike chance from 15% to 20% in PvE. Weaver's Prowess, this trait has been reworked and moved to the bottom adept trait slot, and it will gain you resistance if you attune to a single element. Remember, this is for Weaver, so they can choose to like never do that or do that when they want to. Master's Fortitude has been reworked and moved to the top master trait slot, which gives you barrier when you dodge. Swift Revenge has been reworked. Dual attacks grant bonuses based on their elements, and anytime you do a dual attack, you're firing with 2 elements, so you'll always get 2 of these. So if you use a fire-water attack, you'll gain might and remove a condition from yourself. If you do a water-air attack, you'll remove a condition and give yourself swiftness, and Earth does endurance, and so on. Elements of Rage will no longer give bonus precision. This trait will now give access to Unravel as an additional profession skill. Increase the strike damage bonus from 7 to 15% in PvE. Increase the Condi damage bonus from 5 to 10% in PvE. Woven Stride no longer has an internal cooldown and will only trigger when you grant swiftness or super speed to yourself. This trait no longer improves the effects of swiftness, and it no longer grants swiftness when you are inflicted with an inhibiting condition. So Woven Stride used to read gain swiftness when you are inflicted with an inhibiting condition, and when gaining either super speed or swiftness, you gain regeneration and cleanse a condition. Okay, so now this will have good synergy with all these other things that can give you swiftness, like every time you fire a dual attack skill that includes air in it, which gives you a swiftness application, and Elemental Pursuit, where you gain swiftness when you disable an enemy. So this will have synergy with those. Invigorating Strengths, this trait has been reworked and renamed to Flow State. Flow State will reduce the recharge time of your attunements and your dual attack skills, and I believe it's by 20%, like so many skills that got it baked in. Okay, Engineer. Engineer's changes are focused on improving some of its lesser used skills and traits. I'm going to open a cough drop while I'm talking. We've added more sources of regen to the Invention specialization to help enable Energy Amplifier. Turrets are also getting a small update that will allow players to reactivate the turret's overcharge after enough time has elapsed without needing to detonate and replace them. So, for a very long time, Engineer's turrets, the most effective way to use them was put them down, they'll overcharge, they'll do a big thing, you self-destruct them, they go on cooldown. They don't like that. Honestly, I think that's pretty stupid also, and they're changing that. There's a long turret history there, but not important for the TLDR section. So all turret skills, when you put them down, they will still overcharge. But then after enough time has passed, they will be available to overcharge again. I don't know how that's going to happen. I am guessing, because like when you put down a turret, the button flips over and becomes a self-destruct the turret button. I'm guessing that it will then flip again and become overcharge, and then you can hit overcharge, then it will go back to self-destruct. So if you just leave it on the ground, the overcharge keeps popping up. That is my assumption. And it will still overcharge right when you place them. Healing Mist, reduce cooldown by 5 seconds, so makes it a little bit easier if you're using that for regen uptime. That is the tool belt skill connected to Elixir Gun, commonly used by support engineers. Energizing Slam and Rocket Fist prototype are on the Mace, that's the Mace 2 and 3, and they are getting slight buffs in PvP and Worldview World. They are wanting the Mace to fill like a bruisery role. I was about to say something else, but not really important for the TLDR. Pry Bar and Throw Wrench from the toolkit are getting slight cooldown reductions. Cleansing Synergy trait now also grants regen to allies. Reconstruction Enclosure increases the protection duration by half a second from this skill. Auto Defense Bomb Dispenser is now Sapping Device. Sapping Device weakens enemies when you immobilize or disable them. Mecha Legs, the trait that used to buff the speed of your legs but now no longer buffs the speed of your legs, will now improve the speed of your legs. They remembered why they named it that. Bunker Down, the bandages created by this trait will now give regeneration. The mines created by this trait will now inflict vulnerability. So a little more utility there. Okay. Guardian. We've been periodically updating Guardian's symbol skills to have additional effects on the first pulse. Really quick, the reason for that is largely because of PvP and World v. World. In PvE, it is very common that your raid group can stand in the symbol for its whole duration. In PvP and World v. World, battles are constantly moving. So it's very common a Guardian might throw down a symbol and it might hit them once or twice before they have moved out of it and are forced to move on to another location. Maybe they're running in a straight line, they throw the symbol in front of them, so they pass through it and maybe get a third tick. So they're trying to add a little more oomph to the first pulse so that it's less punishing if they're forced out of it. So Symbol of Swiftness, which pulses swiftness, will pulse super speed on the first pulse. Symbol of Vengeance will do a daze on the first hit. Symbol of Energy does more damage on the first hit. And Hunters, that's not a symbol, we'll come back to that. Also, there have been some slight cooldown changes. Cooldown slightly increased on Swiftness and Vengeance. And the power coefficient of Symbol of Energy slightly nerfed in PvE. The first hit of Symbol of Energy is buffed in all game modes. The follow-up hits are nerfed in PvE. Because again, their whole thing is they're trying to shift more of the damage to the front. Hunter's Ward, that is the Baby Gates attack from Longbow 5 on Guardians. Now it will, instead of caging you for 5 seconds, it'll cage you for 3, which is still very deadly if you can catch someone in that. Trade-off, they're reducing the cooldown down to 30 seconds in PvP, so you can fire it more often. Dragon Hunter, Wings of Resolve, massive buff to the heal. Purification, a little buff to the heal in PvP and World v. World. Test of Faith, reduce the pass-through power coefficient by like half in PvP, but increased the damage bonus against CC'd enemies from 33% to 200% in PvP. So that last part is enough to make many people freak out. Let me explain this really quick. So they said their goal is if someone puts down the Test of Faith, which is that ring of blades, and then they CC you through it, so they pull you into it or they knock you back out of it, the half damage and then increased damage, you take about as much as you did before. But if you're in the Ring of Blades and you just step out of it and you weren't CC'd, you will take less than you used to. So they are rewarding the Dragon Hunters that do their combos correctly. And they are, it's a little easier for the person fighting the Dragon Hunter to get out of it without losing like a massive chunk of your health if you were not like getting comboed down. The classic Dragon Hunter combo is they make the the Test of Faith, and then maybe throw some other traps on it too. They fire the chain at you, pull you into it, and knock you back. So you just go like ping pong, and you get hit by all of it twice. All right, Procession of Blades reduced the power coefficient from 0.36 to 0.25 in PvP. Dragon's Maw reduced the cooldown from 60 seconds to 45. So Dragon's Maw plus Procession of Blades is a classic combo. They want the effectiveness of just leaving these two traps somewhere on the map. They want their effectiveness to go down. So if you're just a random guy and you walk into a Dragon Hunter trap and the Dragon Hunter's already moved on and he's across the map and you get hit by these, there's a less of a chance to just absolutely blunder you, because they want the Dragon Hunter to do something to contribute toward getting a kill. So it's still mighty inconvenient, and now they can do it more often, but it's not going to shred as many people as it used to. Hunter's Determination trait now also causes elite skills to grant you endurance. Hunter's Fortification trait will also trigger when you evade attacks. Firebrand Unrelenting Criticism no longer causes Symbol of Vengeance to daze on its first hit, because they baked that in. Increases the bleeding duration from 1 second to 3 in PvP and World v. World. Willbender Power for Power. Increase Willbender Flame damage bonus from 100% to 200% in PvE only. So don't panic PV people. There we go. Don't panic PV people, because this is only a PvE change. All right, Mesmer. We're focusing on Chaos specialization changes and improvements in weapon usability for this update. Staff is getting its cooldown reductions rolled into the weapon baseline. Pistol and Torch are seeing cooldown reductions as well. Phantasmal Duelist will now always inflict bleeding to reduce the reliance on the Duelist Discipline trait for it to be an effective skill. Shaper of Chaos is a new Grandmaster trait in the Chaos line that will synergize well with Staff and serve as a capstone damage trait for the spec. Prismatic Understanding will now have a more consistent strength while also granting more stealth. So let's go through these real fast. All of this is the cooldown on staff skills is reduced. That's all those lines together. These two, the cooldown of offhand pistol skills are reduced. However, Phantasmal Duelist now has the Phantasms Apply Bleeding baseline. You no longer have to take the Duelist Discipline trait for your Phantasms to apply bleeding. If you take the trait, it will still give you the recharge reduction for when you interrupt a foe, you get your skills recharged slightly. You'll still get that. Okay, Prestige, shorter cooldown by 5 seconds. Phantasmal Mage, shorter cooldown by 5 seconds. Blade Call, if you're not moving, it will now automatically turn your character to face the target. Most skills in the game do this, and this skill is one of the few that doesn't, and they are fixing that. Hey, see you about time. One sec. Okay, Mini-Me is off to bed. All right, Signet of Domination. They reduce the cooldown from 45 seconds to 25, reduce the stun duration from 3 seconds to 2 in PvE. The skill now removes boons from the target. The reasoning for this is they said that most people that take this never actually click the button. They want this to be something that is sometimes worth pressing. So they drastically reduced the cooldown, and they also added some more functionality to it. Veil, which is a utility skill that puts a little line on the ground, and if you or teammates go through it, they get a 2-second stealth. Reduce the cooldown from 72 seconds to 30 in PvP only. A 30-second cooldown and a utility slot for a 2-second stealth possibly on your team could be interesting. Combine that with the shorter cooldown on the Prestige, you're going to see Mesmers go invisible slightly more often than they used to. Vicious Expression. This trait now increases base strike damage and is further increased against boonless foes. So before, it did more, deal increased damage to foes without boons, and disabling a foe would remove boons from them, so it's slightly different now. Method of Madness, Lesser Chaos Storm will no longer daze. Reduce the cooldown of Lesser Chaos Storm from 75 seconds to 35 in PvP and Worldview World. So they're allowing you to use it way more often and trade off for losing the days. Chaotic Interruption. This trait is now in the Master tier, replacing Chaotic Potency. New Grandmaster tier trait, Shaper of Chaos. Can you make it the text larger? Yeah. Sorry, I could have done that earlier. Let's see, where were we? Okay. Shaper of Chaos. When you would grant yourself Chaos Aura when you already have a Chaos Aura, you instead cause your Chaos Aura to detonate. Detonating the Chaos Aura grants your boons and inflicts conditions on nearby enemies. Now, they specifically said the second aura that replaces the first one has to come from you. Because what they don't want to have happen is a group full of Mesmers all spamming AoE Chaos Auras and just 20 detonations per second happening. They don't want that. So, it does have to be your own Chaos Aura if you're using this trait. But it synergizes well with like the staff cooldown reduction and some other stuff that gives you Chaos Auras. Prismatic Understanding. This trait now causes your 4th Shatter skill to grant Stealth. This trait no longer grants random boons while in Stealth, and instead grants regen when entering Stealth and Protection Resolution upon leaving Stealth. Virtuoso. Psychic Force no longer knocks back enemies or breaks stun, and will instead cause your next Bladesong skill to be unblockable. This is a trade-off here, because Psychic Riposte, or Riposte, depending on where you're from, this trait no longer causes your next Bladesong skill to become unblockable. So, they're taking the unblockable, and they're moving it here, but they are making it to where if you are familiar with how these systems work and you're fighting against the Mesmer, you can predict a little better when they are going to use this. Increase the ammo count from 1 to 2, and increase the power coefficient from 0.7 to 1.5 in PvE, and 0.01 to 1.5 in PvP and Worldview World. All right, Necro. Harbinger's Grandmaster traits are being reworked to introduce new playstyles. Cascading Corruption allows you to unleash bursts of power when consuming Blight. Deathly Haste becomes a more controllable effect, and Doom Approaches will be the end for either you or your opponent. Iconic Necromancer skills such as Epidemic and Corrupt Boon are becoming more powerful, and Scourge's Shades will stick around longer. Life Siphon. This skill now inflicts bleeding on yourself on the initial cast. The skill no longer has increased healing effectiveness while you are bleeding. Increase the base healing coefficient by 0.06 to 0.1 in PvE, and increase base healing coefficient from 0.03 to 0.05 in PvP and Worldview World. Axe skills getting reduced cooldown by 2 seconds. Soul Grasp reduced the ammo recharge from 12 seconds to 10 in PvE and 15 seconds to 12 in PvP and World v World. Spinal Shivers for the focus, also getting some nice cooldown reduction in all game modes. Oppressive Collapse from the Torch will now also attempt to face your target if you're not pressing the movement key. Similar to another skill I mentioned earlier, most skills in the game do this, but this one didn't, so they're fixing that. Taste of Death, I really like this one. The heal skill for the Necro that is the Summon Blood Fiend. If you're not a Necroman, one click you summon the Blood Fiend, it does a weak attack that does a small life steal for itself and you. If you hit the button again, you sacrifice the Blood Fiend and you get a bigger heal, and then it goes on cooldown, and then eventually you can resummon it. Now, instead of killing it, you take half its health, up to 50% of its max health. So if it's full health, it won't die, and it doesn't go on the long cooldown, and it can keep attacking and giving you those small heals. I really like that. Epidemic, which, the cough drop for my voice, side effect. Increase the max stacks transferred from 5 to 8. So Epidemic is a skill that has been nerfed many, many times over the years because it was just incredibly, incredibly powerful. They have decided that it warrants a little bit of a buff back up. So now if you Epidemic one target, you'll copy up to 8 stacks of stuff from it to other targets. Corrupt Boon, increase the number of boons converted into conditions from 5 to 8 in PvP only, which is a lot. However, I believe the trade-off here is they are giving up a utility slot for this. So if a Necro hits you with this, they are running one less defensive button, like a Spectral Walk or a Stun Break or something like that. But this is quite nasty. Spiteful Talisman, the straight no longer reduces the cooldown of axe and focus skills. They got that for free. Now increases base strike damage and is further increased against boonless foes. Dark Defiance has been reworked to Dark Defense. Dark Defense, you gain Prot and Carapace when you use a heal skill. Prot reduces incoming condition damage. Corruptor's Fervor no longer grants Prot and instead grants damage reduction while above the Carapace threshold. This is cool for multiple reasons. One, this means if you have Prot also, you got both. So you're going to be really tanky. Two, this is a form of tankiness that cannot be removed with boon removal or boon corruption. So there are some strengths to having this be baked into something that is not technically a boon. Reaper, increase the damage from Soul Eater from 12 to 15% in PvE. Manifest Sandshade, cooldown and duration increase from 8 to 15 seconds in PvE, making the build a little less carpal tunnel. Harbinger, Elixir of Risk, reduce the cooldown from 25 to 20 seconds and increase the power coefficient from 1.0 to 2.0 in PvE only. The skill now inflicts Torment. Cascading Corruption has been reworked. You gain stacks of Cascading Corruption when you consume Blight. When you reach the stack threshold, you will explode necrotic energy and increase your damage for a duration. So, good time to, oh! There you go. Deathly Haste. This trait has been reworked. Grant boons to nearby allies when you enter Harbinger's Shroud when you use Dark Barrage. So before, Harbingers just pulsed quickness constantly when they were in the Shroud. Now it's attached specifically to the Dark Barrage button. So once we get the numbers, people will do the math to figure out, like, okay, each time you go into Shroud, do 3 Dark Barrages before leaving Shroud, or something like that. They'll figure out, like, this is what's required to keep quickness up, and that'll become, like, the new rotation. But they didn't like it when people just stayed in Shroud in like World v World blobs and just pulsed out quickness constantly and didn't do anything else. So if you hate this change, blame the deadbeat Necros, the lazy ones. Doom approaches, Blight reduces more of your health and accumulates faster, but your Shroud skills are improved. So they want this to be huge risk reward. They have not released the numbers for how the Shroud skills are improved, but we know they're going to be much deadlier, but you're going to be squishier. So you or them dies a few seconds later is the idea. All right, Ranger. Druid is the focus of Ranger changes this update. Woo! Glyph of Unity is being reworked to be a tool that complements Celestial Avatar, and Rejuvenating Ties will no longer be channeled. There are a slew of trait changes. Verdant Etching's effect will depend on form. Grace of the Land moves to the Master tier, and Cultivated Synergy is becoming a new Grandmaster trait that rewards the use of water fields. Okay, Astral Wisp, that's Ranger Staff 2, sends the wisp to a target location instead of your target. Upon arrival, it then attaches to allies and heals them over time. So currently, my character wasn't logged in. Currently, if you use the Staff 2 on a target, you have to face them. There is a cast time. There is a travel time for the wisp. And then after it connects to the target, then it starts healing. So just really quickly here, going to whoop. And so it goes over there. And then that's the wisp there. So often, as a druid, in PvE and PvP, but different builds, Staff 2 is only worth pressing if everything else is on cooldown. It's so bad. But now, if you could just like shoot it to a location, then you might even be able to use it to heal yourself. You could just throw it at your own feet or something. So that is pretty awesome. This is a little it's a QOL to a weak skill, making it a little bit better. I like it. Go for the Throat, a trait that is not in Soul Beast tree, but it's often used for Soul Beast, is getting a damage buff with Soul Beast by 5%. Glyph of Rejuve and Alignment are getting a slight radius increase to 360 units. Glyph of Equality will now give stability in PvP. Glyph of Equality is one of two ways that a druid can give their team stability in the game. And it gives 1 stack of stability in PvE and 0 stability in PvP or World v. World. So in PvP and World v. World, this does not give any stability at all. But they are giving it stab in PvP and increasing the stacks. No mention of World v. World. I'm not sure if they're doing it there. Glyph of the Tides does a knockback when you're out of Astral and a pull when you're in Astral. Now it's going to be a knockdown. The reason for this is bunker druids. Druids that just sit on a node and you try to stop them from decapping it and they just knock you off of the point. And they use Glyph of the Tides, and then you come in, and then they longbow knock you back, and they just come in, and they just keep doing that. And eventually they forcibly decap it, and there's not much you can do. So now it's a knockdown instead of a knockback, which simply reduces the number of knockbacks in a decapped druid's arsenal. But reduce cooldown and trade-off. Glyph of Unity is now Glyph of Burgeoning. Glyph of Unity was largely not used in almost any game mode, I think, except for like one meme thing with Deimos that I know of. Now Glyph of Burgeoning will heal nearby allies and give you Astral Force. That's the power bar to go back into your Astral mode. But if you're already in Avatar form, it instead grants allies Barrier and Endurance. I don't know the numbers, I don't know how much. Celestial Avatar currently has a 20-second cooldown in PvP and a 10-second cooldown in PvE and World v. World. The 20-second PvP cooldown is going down to 15. Rejuvenating Tides is no longer channeled, and it has a larger radius. This is Rejuvenating Tides. It is one of the weaker heals. The main reason you use it is to put Alacrity and Might, because it does multiple ticks, so it does like up to 5 applications. But it's a channel, so while I'm doing it, I can't do anything else. And I also can't combo it. It's a water field, but I'm channeling it, so I can't do like a blast in it very easily. They are making it to where the thing is instant and just follows you around, which allows you to more easily blast that water field and do other things while it is running. So I believe, based on their description, that you could go Astral. 2 can be used at the same time as other buttons, and you could just go like 2-4 at the same time, and then hit 5, and then all 3 are going at once. Druidic Clarity is a trait that cures conditions off allies, slightly increase the range. Cultivated Synergy has been moved to the Grandmaster tier and reworked. Now, when you use a healing skill, it will heal around your pet and make a water field around your pet. When you blast a water field, you'll grow a Seed of Life at the location. Seed of Life is Astral 2. It's the move that looks like that. It blinds enemies and does a small heal and condition cleanse on allies. So I don't know if there's an internal cooldown on this, but anytime you blast a water field, you make a Seed of Life. So this rewards water field combo gameplay, and they've also made using the water fields easier with this change here. Blood Moon, this trait no longer dazes enemies around you when you enter Celestial Avatar form. And they said were doing this because it's not fun to play against. I heard that same excuse when they came out with Ancient Seeds, and in response, I say that Spellbreakers are not fun to play against, so get rid of those. I'm still waiting on them to get back to me on that one. Celestial Shadow, slight radius increase, just like everything else. Verdant Etching is now in the Adept tier. This trait will now cause glyphs to heal nearby allies, but if you're in Avatar form, it does protection to nearby allies instead. I don't know if anyone is ever going to use this thing. So you've got Druidic Clarity, the new thing is going here, Verdant Etching is moving there, and you got Blood Moon. I think any Condi Druid is going to take Blood Moon. I think any Heal Druid is going to take this. I think this is going to never be used, unless the numbers on it are just really powerful. But I might be wrong, we'll see. Natural Balance no longer grants concentration. Natural Balance is a trait for condition damage druids, so that's kind of like a nothing. Grace of the Land, this is the big one. This trait has been moved to the Master tier. Grace of the Land is the trait that gives Alacrity. It's moving here. Typically, people would say that Ranger does not have anything in its kit that can be an Alac DPS. Because this is the Alacrity, this is the DPS. They're in the same tier, they conflict with each other. But if you're moving Grace of the Land there, you could take Grace and Eclipse, and suddenly Alac DPS Druid is born. Another problem with it is while you're a Condi Druid, the Eclipse will add a condition to each of these. But if you are channeling this to give your group Alacrity, this is also putting out Chill, a non-damaging condition. So your DPS is 0 while channeling that, but it's instant now. Or it's going to be instant. So you just hit that button, you're pulsing out the Chill and the Alacrity, and you can be firing off other attacks at the same time. Lingering Light is a lot more accessible now. So Heal Druids could now, Grace the Land is there, and then they could take Lingering Light right here. So they are nerfing it a bit, because now that you can take it, it's too good. I did a whole video series a long time ago about how Lingering Light feels amazing, and it feels like the way Druid's meant to be played. But it feels like the community doesn't really let you take stuff like that, because then you have to get somebody else to bring the Alacrity. So we will see some Lingering Light Druids going forward after the change. And Soul Beast is getting a 5% damage buff in PvE from Furious Strength. Gale Shot Shrike is getting a small power buff in PvE. All right. Revenant. Revenant changes to this update are primarily focused on reworking some of the Renegade's traits. All for One is intended to be a trait that synergizes best with the legendary Renegade stance, but its current implementation isn't something that we're happy with. We've moved the strength damage bonus into Heart Piercer to make room for a new trait that plays into the stance's band together mechanic, refunding some energy and reducing the recharge time for those enhanced skills. Bold Reversal and Righteous Rebel have also been updated to give supportive Renegade builds additional tools. All right. So Coalescence of Ruin and Drop the Hammer are getting small power buffs in PvE. Rite of the Great Dwarf and Versed in Stone have been shuffled a little bit. Rite of the Great Dwarf will now also grant condition damage reduction, but the damage reduction it gives has been reduced from 50 to 33%. Versed in Stone now increases the damage reduction of Rite of the Great Dwarf from 33% back up to 50, but no longer is required to reduce condition damage. So if you have both of these things, you're getting the same effects as before, but they've shuffled around what gives what. Ashen Demeanor trait reworked, gain might resistance and Kala's Fervor when you use a heal skill. Bold Reversal trait reworked, Citadel Order improves skills. Heroic Command also grants swiftness. Citadel Bombardment inflicts vulnerability. Orders from Above also grants protection. Heart Piercer trait also will grant increased strike damage against bleeding enemies. All for One trait reworked. When you trigger Band Together, gain energy and reduce the recharge time of the enhanced skill. Vindication trait no longer increases the number of missiles fired by Citadel Bombardment and instead causes it to daze enemies on the first hit that strikes them. So they felt like this was a little too RNG, and if you used Citadel Bombardment and every hit connected, and also all of the bonus missiles from Vindication connected, it was way too much damage. So they took away those bonus missiles and gave a daze to, if anyone gets hit by one of these, they're going to get dazed. Righteous Rebel, this trait now also causes Orders from Above to heal allies. All right, Thief. Silent Scope is an incredibly powerful trait, granting stealth on an easily repeatable trigger. We've needed to introduce a number of special exceptions to stealth-related traits to keep them at an appropriate power level alongside Silent Scope. We think the amount of stealth generated by this trait is still too high, and for this update we decided to rework it entirely. We still want Deadeye to have an adequate amount of stealth access, and we've added some additional options to utility skills, namely Signet of Shadows and Smokescreen. Deadeye's Mark is a skill that has always been difficult to utilize for melee-purpose Deadeyes, with the loss of the gap-closing ability of the Core Thief's Steel. In order to better enable these playstyles for Deadeye, their Mark's behavior will now change based on their currently equipped weapon. Ranged weapons will keep the current behavior, but having a melee weapon equipped will now allow the Deadeye to shadow step to their target while applying the Mark. And they did say it checks the main hand. So if you've got dagger pistol, then you'll teleport. If you have pistol dagger, you won't. Pistol whip has been replaced with flawless execution. Flawless execution, you shoot with your pistol as you spin and strike nearby enemies, finish with a powerful forward slash. They said their goal here is for people that play sword pistol, that they did not have a really good damage skill. And this is meant to be that damage skill. Death's Advance, using Sniper's Cover, now automatically swaps to this skill regardless of whether you're standing in the Sniper's Cover. While standing within Sniper's Cover, this move becomes ground targeted instead. Smokescreen no longer pulses blindness to enemies within its range, instead inflicting debilitating conditions on enemies passing through the smoke screen. Additionally, you will gain stealth on exiting the smoke screen. And they mentioned that it would... They mentioned some different conditions like confusion, but we don't have a tooltip for that yet. Signet of Shadows, the active portion of this skill has been reworked. Upon using this skill, it will now give you stealth and swiftness while removing all movement inhibiting conditions from yourself. Increase the cooldown of the skill from 16 to 30 seconds in PvP and World v. World. Shadow Refuge will now additionally grant condition damage and strike damage reduction to allies inside the field. They said, it's called Shadow Refuge. It should be a refuge. You should feel safer while in it. Even the odds, this trait no longer applies might. Instead, apply cripple and blindness to enemies you strike with your stealth attack. Improvisation, Spectres now gain additional shadow force from Siphon while equipping this trait. Lotus Poison trait additionally grants might when you poison an enemy. Panic Strike no longer immobilizes foes under the health threshold, because that felt like it was kind of random. This trait now immobilizes foes struck if they have more than a set number of conditions. Which, I think if you... They said, like, for example, 4, but that's not set in stone. But if you are using steel and you've got it set to, like, remove boons and add condies and stuff, it's going to be pretty easy to proc this, I think. Rending Shade no longer inflicts fear on nearby foes when you strike a boonless foe. It instead destroys that foe's barrier if your stealth attack hits a boonless foe. Deadeye's Mark is now instant, and you'll shadow step to your foe if you have a main hand dagger, sword, staff, or spear. Silent Scope has been reworked. This trait now grants precision as long as the trait's equipped. You gain additional precision for a short time when you enter stealth. And Warrior. Oh boy. Bladesworn is the main focus of the Warrior update, with the goal of creating some additional playstyles for the spec. Swift as the Wind and River's Flow have been reworked to augment the Gunsaber's skills, including Dragon Slash, to focus on either Condi damage and supportive elements, respectively. Neither main-hand sword nor offhand dagger see a lot of play, and we made some bigger changes to solidify their identities to hopefully make them more appealing options. Sword will be more focused on condition damage with some personal survivability tools, and dagger gets an additional crowd control tool to synergize with Wastrel's Ruin. Savage Leap now inflicts bleeding. Final Thrust has been reworked and replaced with Rend. Rend, maim your target with an immobilizing strike, then deliver a devastating blow that does heavy bleeding. So these are all for the main hand sword. Flurry is replaced by Bloodthirster, the new burst skill. Bloodthirster, sweep your blade around yourself, slicing nearby enemies. The effect increases with adrenaline level. Heal if you strike a target, heal more if they are bleeding. Wastrel's Ruin and Blade Storm are for offhand dagger. Increases power coefficient by a total of 0.25 in PvP and World v. World. Blade Storm has been replaced with Hush Blade, which does a cone that dazes enemies in front of you. Earthshaker, these are hammer changes. So let's just say hammer's getting buffed in PvE. All this is hammer damage increase PvE. All right, Bladesworn. All of this is basically, you can now move at a reduced speed while channeling your dragon slashes. Dragon Slash Boost is now ground targeted. So you, unless you want to, you don't have to go way past the target. You know, if you're trying to catch up to them, but you might overshoot and go way past, that's no longer the case. Dragon Spike Mine, power reduced, but they're also adding Condi on it. Swift as the Wind, replaced by Sharp as the Wind. Sharp as the Wind makes your Dragon Slash skills do Condi damage, and also while this is equipped, you burn nearby foes and gain increased flow rate when swapping to Gunsaber in combat. River's Flow now changes Dragon Slash to be supportive skills and debilitating for enemies. Additionally, with this trait equipped, you grant swiftness to nearby allies and gain increased flow rate when swapping to Gunsaber in combat. Unseen Sword trait now strikes nearby enemies and grants you increased flow rate when swapping to Gunsaber in combat. Unshakable Mountain now grants barrier to nearby allies every time you convert a certain number of flow into charges. Fierce as Fire now increases strike and Condi damage for each round of ammo spent. Immortal Dragon now grants protection to nearby allies as well as yourself. Daring Dragon now increases the effectiveness of Dragon Slash skills depending on which variation is being used, meaning power or the Condi or the support. And that's it. Woo! Okay, that's as much as I can TLDR it. Hopefully I did a decent job. So, as always, if you got any questions, problems, thoughts, concerns, consider going to the forums. So if you go to the forums and you're pointing something out and you're like, hey, I don't think you should do this change to Weavers, because then people might like them. They might be like, oh, geez, shoot, you're right, and make some changes. You know, so they have been known to reverse some decisions that they've done in the past if you provide, good reasons on there. But that's up to you. I will include a link to the forum post as well as the video if you want to watch it for yourself, as well as the wiki version of the forum post that has links to the skills if you're interested in any of this. And if you got any questions, problems, thoughts, concerns, put them in the comment section down below and I will fight you there.